We're going live. I should have started it a little sooner.
That's okay. Yeah. It's hard to go to Ireland.
Excuse me?
Okay, we are live.
Okay. Call to order, flag salute. Latest.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, liberty, justice for all.
The Planning Commission, do we have anybody in the audience that would like to talk about anything other than what we're going to be talking about tonight?
Public comment right now?
Public comment. Not on anything we're gonna be having on the list tonight, just anything else.
Do we get to talk about
Oh, you
things?
will, oh, yeah, you're gonna have.
Okay, okay.
Okay, not seeing anybody. Set agenda for the planning minutes dated May 10th.
Motion to accept the minutes as presented.
Okay, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Right, discussion items, architectural guideline recommendations for new pump station building at First Street and Plymouth Street, City of St. Helens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman or Vice Chairman. So this is, I think your first action of this year as the Historic Landmarks Commission. So one of your duties as the Planning Commission is to sometimes step into architectural guidelines review role. And so this is one of those items. So what the city's doing, OTAC and the City of St. Helens are kind of a joint applicant on this. It's for a new pump station on the waterfront site, so the Riverfront redevelopment site. The pump station facility is needed in order to serve the site with sanitary sewer. So we are installing that in preparation for future development on the site. It's part of a larger street and utility extension project. So this is one small component of a large infrastructure extension project on the property. And we're here today because the property is zoned Riverfront District, Mill Sub-District, and that entire zoning district is subject to architectural character review for any new construction or permanent exterior alterations to buildings within that sub-district. So what that means is with this new pump station facility, it's under 400 square feet. It's a small utility building, but we're subjecting this building to architectural character review. And hopefully you all have copies of those design guidelines. They're online as well. But I've also included copies or excerpts of the relevant guidelines that I think are applicable to this in your packet. So those are also in your packet for this. So just a little bit of background. Originally, the facility was not going to be an enclosed structure. There was just going to be a small facility not subject to building permitting. But over time, we decided that having a larger enclosed structure that houses all of the utility improvements would actually look better than having a screened cyclone fencing around a facility on that site. And so I think ultimately having a small utility building is going to look better than having security fencing and kind of more of an industrial feel pump station than we wanted. So that's just a little bit about the background. The location itself, early on in the process, we were hoping to kind of tuck it back in this area. I'll show some photos of the site. So you've probably walked the trail on the waterfront site quite a bit. There's an area on the site near Nob Hill Nature Park where the basalt bluff kind of has a notch out. And so we really wanted to tuck the facility back into that notch so that we could have the least amount of impact on future development parcels. And also just to kind of screen it by using the bluff itself on two sides. Unfortunately, the geotech report that sampled soils told us, well, you're gonna have to pull it away from the bluff a little bit because the soils are just mostly bedrock next to the bluff, and you're not gonna be able to build the pump station cost effectively that close. So we ended up on the location that you'll see here. So for orientation, this is the larger site plan of the property. North is actually to the right on this, so north is where my cursor is turning. And for Russ's benefit, I should probably share screen. Second here, we've got a commissioner on Zoom, so. Russ, you see that site plan now?
I can't, thank you.
Okay, great. So yes, like I was saying, north is over here. This red box is kind of the general vicinity for the pump station. So this is the future South First Street extension onto the site. Here's that little notch out bluff, and then here's kind of the entrance to Nob Hill Nature Park right around here.
That's the stairs.
Yep, that's the staircase. Yep. Another couple things to note on this.
So that one more time.
Oh, right around here.
Right there.
Thank you.
A couple other items. So this is a stormwater retention area that abuts the pump station facility just to the south. And then also there's what we're calling the Bluff Trail. And the Bluff Trail runs along the basalt bluff. So just as people use the site today, we want to have a pedestrian connection alongside the bluff. And that actually acts as the sidewalk along that side of the roadway. So the pump station is surrounded by a pedestrian trail, a stormwater facility, and then the basalt bluff on those kind of back sides. And then future development would be across the roadway, just past First Street towards the water. So a lot of the architectural guidelines are about new construction and consistency with the buildings on the left and the right of new construction. And in this case, we don't have new development on either side. And so a lot of the architectural guidelines are not directly applicable to this facility. But I'll go through the ones that are. Okay, so first, our architectural guidelines look a lot at lighting. And I put a photo of what the exterior light that has been sourced for the project in the staff memo. I believe there's 3 exterior lights on the building, so I'll pull those up right now. So you can see these are the different facades of the building, and there's 2 on one side and then a 3rd here. So there's 3 lights on the building. Hopefully you read the guidelines and saw there's a couple recommended fixture types. I focus on the fact that these do have tops that keep the lights focused downwards, so you're not going to get light pollution into the residential and park areas above. So that follows our guidelines. I should back up and just look at this overall site plan a little bit, just to kind of orient you some more. So this is a zoomed in version of the pump station facility. There is no fence around the outside, so that's really great. All of the secure features are inside of the building, so it'll be secure. It is a concrete paved pad, so this is the extent of the concrete. You can maybe talk a little bit if there are questions about how the facility is used. I'm not an expert, I'm not an engineer, and I don't use the facility, but I do know that there's not expected to be more than 1 maintenance vehicle in the facility at a time. And so they've paved an area that is large enough to support the facility's maintenance. The actual building itself hosts a generator, and then there's a pump room. So that's kind of the size and scope of the building. There's some exterior underground facilities that are also part of the facility. I'm not the expert on what those do. I just know that they're necessary for the function of the pump station. And then this is the future First Street road extension. There will be kind of temporary access to this building when the road is not constructed, because we're not extending the roadway in the first phase of infrastructure. So we're building the pump station and the Bluff Trail, but we're not gonna extend the roadway right away. And so that's what it says when there's like a temporary access listed here on the site plan. And then you can see the Bluff Trail, which I noted alongside the backside here. This is kind of a gathering spot because you can either go up to Nob Hill here or go south to connect to the Riverwalk project along the water. So that's an overall site plan overview. I'll come back to the facade again, this architectural features, but I do also want to note that there's a detailed landscaping plan. So all of these are individual plants that are in this guide at the end. So each plant corresponds to these letterings. So it's a very generous screening landscaping plan that will screen the facility from the Bluff Trail and from the roadway. And I thought that was relevant because it will obviously impact whether or not you can even see the facility. I just think it's important to include that as part of your conversation. Okay, so back to the building facade. So in the guidelines, there's a whole section on building materials and color. Staff went round and round about what kind of materials this building should be made out of, and ultimately we decided on a cost-effective CMU block. So these are split face CMU blocks, and we did that for anti-graffiti. It's easy to remove graffiti on these types of buildings, and for cost effectiveness. We also have a brand new restroom facility in Grey Cliffs. So there's kind of a history of these utility buildings in the city that are CMU block. CMU block's not a list of prohibited materials. And prohibited materials, in case you're wondering, include vinyl siding, stucco, P111, or other sheet materials. So I think it's an appropriate material, but I wanted to open it up to the commission. Jacob put some wording in there that if the commission is concerned about setting a precedence and using CMU block on this site, that maybe we make some findings about this being a small utility building, and so having kind of that exception for CMU block might be appropriate. I talk a little bit about color. I'm not a huge fan of the forest green roof. I also just generally think that the surrounding basalt and the dark gray, it might make more sense to have a darker roof color, something more in line with that dark gray color that is proposed. You also usually see tan CMU block buildings more in a desert. Or more like in Arizona or New Mexico. And so I just wanted to open up the color palette to the commission if there are any considerations there. The guidelines talk about using a palette of earth tone or muted colors. So that's not super specific guideline, but that's why we have you guys to interpret that. And then lastly, we just talk about rooftop facilities. The guidelines talk about limiting impact of service facilities on the roof. Given this as a utility building, there's not a whole lot we can do with that other than make sure that it's seamless in the color. But I just put some information about that. Yeah, at this point, I think we should just open it up for conversation, questions. I'd love to hear feedback.
How big is?
I think it's 380 square feet, right? 380 something.
Sounds all right.
I know it's under 400.
Architectural, but will the trunk line be put in?
At the same time, yeah. So we are doing all undergrounding. All utilities underground will be built, including that stormwater facility that you saw next to it, and there's another stormwater facility further up. Yeah, but we're leaving this section of First Street will not get built.
Is there going to be this might sound like a silly question, but is there going to be a pump in the pump station?
I think it's used to pump the facility. Yeah, that's the main purpose of it. Is it pumps sanitary sewer waste up to the lagoon.
So there's
Not
a,
in the building itself. So in the pad, there's a set of valve vaults and a wet well, and that's where you're gonna end up having the pumping that comes out.
So Keith, is that this area here?
That's the wet well, and then the valve vault is the rectangle.
This.
I live near a pump station, the one down by the marina. And city flushes its toilet every Tuesday at 10. And so you can hear it fire up in this diesel engine and it runs for a time period. And so I don't know. So my question is just how often is this going to make noise? How often is it going to occur? And is there a way to mitigate that? And so I just kind of want to talk about that kind of thing.
Yeah, and what you might be hearing is the generator that's associated with it.
That's what I figured.
The pump itself. And so the generator is in the building. There were, as Jenny alluded to, there's a couple of things that we had to provide security for. And so the portable generator, making sure that was not easily vandalized or destroyed. And then the electrical controls are in the pump room itself. So the generator will be exercised. I want to say it's typically going to be about once a week that it is exercised. Is the expectation at this point. And when it does, it will make noise. And there are vents on this page, up and to the left, which really equates to south and to the west.
So since this will eventually be an area that'll be, I don't know how we're gonna develop it, but should be some discussion about making sure we have, the feedback is simply make it go off as little as needed and, make sure we put something in that doesn't need to run that often so that it's quieter and less disturbing to people who might be in the surrounding area, either living or being there. That's the feedback that I.
Yeah, and I think for the generator itself, we've had discussions with the city of staff that operate them and how often they want to on exercising them and then the timing, so they can work through that as far as the timing for when that generator is exercised.
The least impactful time period.
Exactly.
I would also say operationally, I guess there's some relevance to architectural guidelines compliance, but not a whole lot. I mean, just putting that out there, but.
I have an architectural thought too.
Yeah.
I liked your thoughts on the roof, and so I think the duller the roof, the better.
Yeah, a darker slate
Yeah.
type color, yeah.
Yeah.
And this drawing is not doing the green justice. I looked up for what the forest green actually looks like, and it's pretty bright. I actually was a little bit surprised how bright it looked. So yeah, anyways, this image is a printed version of a color that then got scanned. So there's a lot of line of communication that didn't get communicated over. But anyways.
And then feedback on the lighting in the architectural standard in the attachments by staff. There was more of a curved thing with no globe being shown. So I don't know if we could have just no visible light emitting, or that could present a security issue. That would be just something I'd throw out there, that the light suggested has a globe that could, throw light around, and that's just some feedback there to make that consideration, is my opinion. And the one that I'm looking at, which is page 9, all the drawings, the green.
Yeah, I've got it pulled up here. That's just what you're
Yeah.
talking about. Yeah. So that's kind of referred to as a gooseneck lighting. And then there's also page 10 that has a couple other, like this is another fixture type that it's recommending, and then more gooseneck type lighting. I don't think that these three are the only types. I think it's up to the commission. We could recommend a fixture type that looks more like this.
It's necessary that you've got this pretty well hidden by a lot of landscaping.
Yeah.
I think it's probably more important to get light at the site for
Security, yeah.
security reasons. But it looked like one of those was architecturally great, but wall washers, which would just light up the wall.
Yeah.
No broadcasting light too far out.
Yeah, that would fall under, I think, what the design standards consider.
Right there.
Yeah, I think that's,
Top one.
these are X'd out, like not preferred to light up a wall in the design guidelines.
Oh.
I mean, unless that's not what you're right to, Russ.
Is the onyx color referred to in the packet, the gray color?
Yes, yeah. That did look like a dark gray, more in line with basalt, I would say, yeah. So, and that was used as an accent color, if I'm not mistaken, the onyx.
I think that I had to look up what CMU was, looks like cinder block.
Yeah.
I think it's a terrible idea in a bigger application, but I could certainly live with it here.
Yeah.
So I like the suggestion of putting a restriction on
Findings.
using it within the district on the size of the building. I don't mind the lighting. Next ones, the scale might be awkward for such a small building. So yeah, those look too big. My thoughts on the green roof is, we have a problem with the green roof. I think there's something to branding city utilities, like that
It's
they all
sewer.
look the same, it's the restroom on that end, doesn't it have a gray cliffs, doesn't have a green roof? Yeah, where people would look at them and automatically know they don't need to be there because it's just another city facility of some kind, so.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want the gray roof just to look like a steel roof if you're. So, but I'm with either.
Like a shiny galvanized steel would be what you're looking for, yeah. Okay.
I don't like the wall washers necessarily. I think they're too modern for the district. But I like it as presented.
Any other discussions? Thoughts?
I want to open it up to you. I know it's hard on Zoom to sometimes get a comment in. Did you have any?
As far as the color palette and the roof are concerned, I actually like them. I thought I heard you mention earlier on there is no fencing around it, and from an aesthetic concept, I appreciate that and agree. However, are there any provisions for security? This is going to be in a unoccupied area, so to speak, for quite a period of time until the riverfront development reaches it, and I would be concerned about vandalism or theft.
Point taken. Thanks, Russ.
I'll echo that.
That's around.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's up to our public works crew and whoever's maintaining the facility to determine the appropriate security measures. Our code allows us to have some crime prevention measures, and they're mostly focused on lighting and making sure that you don't have small alleys that you're proposing. We also talked about the distance from the bluff and making sure we weren't creating a corridor between the bluff and the building for people to hide along the trail. And we countered that by providing enough space and enough lighting along the trail that it's not going to be a dark corridor. But I think so, just to kind of, unless there's other comments, go for it.
Vice Chair Hubbard, I believe there is some desired comment from those attending on this matter.
Okay. Public comments?
I would like to see lights kept as close into the building as construction from small animals.
Sure.
Well, that one that they showed, the small one, growth that he didn't like.
Yeah, but they have other.
Oh, yeah, there's
sites that are-
tons of fixtures, but, okay.
Yeah.
Those are in that they can't. That one green one sticks out way too.
Stick, yeah.
Oh, the gooseneck
Too
one,
far out.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm not hearing a whole lot of suggestions for changing on the architectural, the green color, just kind of leave it as is. Okay, and leave the lighting, because that's kind of unanimous.
Well, that recolor the roof.
Yes. I was hearing people liking it, and then I was hearing. I
No,
think
I'm going with
a dark
gray,
color.
yeah.
Yeah.
Is there a charcoal?
Well, you're gonna have
Yeah.
to replace it eventually. Aren't you gonna have greenery from the hillside anyway? So it's- has the
I just think if you're up on Knob Hill and you're looking down.
It's gonna look like a battleship.
Yeah.
It's like a battleship.
They don't have a
Honestly,
map.
green, gray, whatever.
Free.
Is there a choice between a shiny glossy and a matte?
Yeah, no, the gray is a dark, it's almost black.
Well, I mean, in the green, if they're talking green, is there a matte?
Oh, some compromise in the middle. Is that what you mean?
I mean, you said it's too shiny. It says it's glossy. Is there a matte?
A flat.
Green.
Yeah, I mean, we could certainly look for something. I don't know what the level of gloss of the roof is.
Okay, that's there's public comment on this subject. Go ahead, come on
I
in.
need to come up to the too.
You can state your name for the record too.
Howard Blumenthal, Friends of Knob Hill Nature Park, which abuts all this. I think the coloring and the building shape is just fine. I do have minor concerns with the fact that we have recently, with the Lions Club, installed a bench at the top of the hill. And we're about to install another one that basically will look right over the top of this. So I'm a little bit concerned about hearing if there's a way that, that a generator could come on at times. Is there a way to have it on the wall away from the park? I'm also concerned a little bit that you have a giant vent fan on top of it. What type of noise will come from the vent fan? Will that be on 24 hours a day, just when it gets to a certain temperature? So that people that, if you're sitting at one of those benches, you're not hearing a roar constantly. That those would be my questions. Also, when we started taking a look, recently on 1/3 of our staircase, we've had mature landscaping growing on. City came in and totally mowed everything like 1/3 of the way up each side of the staircase and taking out a bunch of our Oregon grape and stuff. And so that comes to light then that a lot of your plantings that you're suggesting are non-natives. And is there a way to have more native plants in that area that would do the same screening job? We also noticed that you have like a red oak tree. Oak trees put off the acorns, and we're a little concerned with that one, that we were a white oak nature area, that we could start ending up with red oak trees trying to grow in the park from a red oak that's planted on the hill. So we're a little bit concerned with that. We'd like to see more native plants included in that, because that's kind of a gateway to the nature park. I'm a little bit lost right now to think also about how to go about trying to reestablish some of our landscaping. We had a good 12 plants get taken out that's grown down there recently. And we've been trying to keep motorcyclists, because we've had motorcyclists going up and down that hill. I mean, how quickly will the landscaping happen? How do we coordinate that with trying to get more of our landscaping back on that hillside? What is all the time frame? I think there needs to be some coordination in there. So we know how that hill is going to be landscaped. And like I say, once again, just getting more native plants around that thing, since that's kind of the gateway.
I mean, is there a way, I don't know where we are in this process. Is there a way to loop this into
Yeah,
the parks to have them review the landscaping and provide?
So
them-
Howard's counterpart is co-steward of Knob Hill Nature Park. She sent an email kind of explaining their concerns about the planting list. And Mohammed is the project manager for this. He's the public works director. So I don't have direct control over what gets changed in the planting list. I forwarded her concerns on. So really it's up to them to work out an agreement. I think the biggest concern I would relay is the red oak. I think that's a valid concern. We can probably pick different trees that will spread into a white oak savanna. But as far as having a specialized native plant list just for this area, I just don't think that's feasible for a contractor to have a specialized list for this area and then a different list for the rest of the project. Because they buy in bulk and they buy what's available. And our landscape architecture firm, you know, they picked plants based on their ability to survive and screen facilities and, you know, anyways, that's my thoughts on it.
Have they looked at all at the possibility that there would be a native that would be the
We can
exact
ask,
same thing?
oh yeah, we can ask for sure, especially on the oak concern. I think that's a really valid one.
Mhm.
But again, all of this is unrelated to the architectural review of the building.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah,
I thought just seeing the plan, because I was just trying to figure out also what we're doing with the bottom of our stairs now.
Sure, and that's
I mean,
different.
erosion.
Yeah, that,
Because we're getting caught up in a thing, Mohammed says I need to talk to parks, but really,
oh,
that's
because it's
part
like
of
at
the
the
parks.
border of the
That part of the park
I understand.
is the staircase, and now I'm getting caught up between different people. So is it either park or is it public works? We've separated parks and public works now,
Yeah,
whereby they used to be kind of combined, so if you talk to one person, you were kind of talking to everybody. And now there's starting to be a little more, less communication about what's going on in areas. Yeah, in our parks and stuff, which is, especially in Nob Hill, is kind of becoming a little disturbing in some areas. You know.
we're just planning.
What?
We're just planning. We're the other P. I'm
So,
sorry.
so I mean, I need to talk to somebody to find out, should we
Yeah.
be replacing the landscaping that we lost at the bottom of the hill?
Think more on the architecture of the building.
No, I think it's good. It's mainly like, is that vent fan running 24 hours a day, or is it just on when it gets to
I
a
can
certain
tell you,
temperature?
I lived next to one for more than a year and a half now.
Uh-huh.
Other than the one time a week when it goes off, it's 100% quiet. I can't hear anything.
And one last thing on that, is there any chance of doing it with an electrical pump? Right now, with fuel prices going as expensive as they are we really wanting to invest to have a fossil fuel generator
Natural gas, isn't it?
on the building? Is it natural gas or is it,
No, it's the pump station itself is electrically controlled.
The generators run on what?
The generators run on gas.
natural gas?
Diesel.
Diesel.
So, yeah, and then, I mean,
Strictly backup.
Is that it?
It's
It's
a backup.
backup?
it's a backup, it's an emergency backup.
Okay.
That way.
Very much, let's move on.
Mainly just the fan then is my only concern.
I think I have what I need from you all as a recommendation, unless there's anything that we missed. Thanks.
I can't sit back there and not speak. That nature. I'm Les Waters. My address is 2035 Southeast Main, Portland. I own property above this project on North Third. Is there, I know you have budget constraints. I don't know much about it, but where it's located is kind of an important place for the city. Have you considered using a basalt facing on the building so that it would blend into the environment and maybe be an attribute to the community rather than just a utility building? So that's my comment. And they do stink when they go up.
I actually thought about that basalt, but I think we're looking, it's gonna be pretty well shielded, this building, and we really are looking for defense on graffiti.
And it's a cost savings, to use the CMU.
But it's gonna, the building's really not gonna be very visible.
That's
so
right.
We're gonna try and screen it as much as possible.
I think we need to make sure to hold the city to the same standard that we would hold any other citizen or any other application.
Well, I don't think we're I mean, this particular material, I think we should say is an exception, because I think this is gonna be an exception. I think you would suggest that we actually say that would be our thought on that.
Due to its small maintenance facility nature, I
Correct.
think we should allow an exception to the, the standard facade you would expect on a commercial residential building.
Size, location, and use.
Do we limit it specifically by square footage or?
I think we limit it to this building. And if there's another one later, we'll think about it.
That works. Yeah, I mean, you'll get the same opportunity with any other building.
For the cinder block building.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I agree.
I
Okay. All right, that's done. We have item recommendation for street vacation at North First Street, North and South River Street, and Columbia Boulevard. Lock, Williamson, Preston, Jones.
Okay, this is gonna be a tag team effort. You did hear.
I think I need to do it.
Yes, we will do that stuff. So both Jenny and I will be presenting this. This isn't a formal public hearing. The planning commission will be giving a recommendation to the city council. Even though it's not a formal one, we should do some formal items. And that's, does any member of the commission wish to declare an ex parte contact, conflict of interest, or bias in this matter?
I do.
I do also.
And there was been a little bit of prior communication. And my understanding is both of you would sit out on this item.
Not on the commissioner hearing, yes, so, but going to appear as a witness.
I plan to also.
We left us.
And I own property at 144 North Second Street, which is not abutting, but I don't know whether it falls within the guidelines.
Well, it's just a question of whether or not you think that creates any kind of bias or such in your mind. The other two have properties that are really close, so that's kind of why they're feeling the way they do. And since we asked that, we know two of our commissioners are going to become citizens for the purpose of this matter. For the ones that are going to remain, does anyone from the audience want to object to the ability of commissioner to make a fair decision? Again, this is not a public hearing, but we do like to keep things.
Well, Jacob, I read some of the ethical rules on this thing, and so yeah, I spent a lot of time going over the ethics stuff on this. And so I think I need to like make some kind of statement for the record. I do believe this isn't a formal hearing. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, that would be, it would certainly would not hurt.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it said that, so, and I'll try and keep it brief. I did send a notice of recusal to Kathy Payne, which she can then publish. There are a couple of corrections to that. I will not participate as a planning commissioner concerning the planning commission hearing regarding petition of Keith and Laura Locke, Diane Marie Dillard Revocable Living Trust, Susan Jones, and Williamson Trust. Direct financial interest. I have no direct financial interest or benefit from this proposal. Potential indirect financial interest. The proposed vacancy of right-of-way indirectly probably has a negative financial impact on the property owned by my wife and I, 131, 135, 139 North River Street. Our property abuts the property proposed to be vacated. Our property is identified in the legal description in the petition as it's actually next to the area that is identified in the petition. The area identified in the petition is the west 30 feet of the North First Street, Columbia Street right-of-way, abutting lots 22, 21, and the south half of lot 20, block 16. My wife and I own the area of the north half of lot 20, block 16, which touches the south half of lot 20, block 16. Let's see. ORS 272.0802 states there shall be appended to such petition as part thereof and as a basis for granting the same, the consent of the owners of all abutting property. My wife and I are the owners of property abutting the proposed area to be vacated. My wife and I did not consent to the vacation of property. We contend that the staff finding the applicant submitted documentation showing 100% consent of all property owners abutting a portion of the street right of way
Yes.
to be vacated.
Steve, I'm sorry to interrupt.
Is that enough?
Yeah, you're delving into a person out here as far as the recusal statements.
Okay.
So, I mean, that
Well,
stuff.
let's just say this, I didn't feel that I could sit as a judge or participate as a planning commissioner which adjudicates a legal right belonging to my wife and I. And then I haven't had any ex parte disclosure since I had this notice. Before the notice, I talked to Sue Jones about this and I expressed my concern that this wasn't in the best public interest. But that's before I had noticed that this thing was even live. And then I talked to staff about it and went around with staff about whether my property abutted or not and could not persuade staff that we did. And therefore, that's the extent of my disclosure.
Then we will need you to give up your cushy chair
Thank you.
for the purpose of this, item. And then,
So
Russ, well, I don't know if you would like to make any,
just about why you're recusing.
recusal
yourself,
statements.
got you on
Well, I own an abutting property and I also believe it may indirectly impact my property value.
You would like to testify later as a citizen, is that right?
I think I'm going to, yes.
Okay, so for the purposes of this part, I'll just put you on mute so that it's like you're a citizen.
Now, we did receive some things since your packets. A couple things from citizens and one thing from staff. So if they have your collection of goodies, you know how much you love goodies. Okay. So we said this is not a formal public hearing. This is something that will go before the council to a public hearing yet to be scheduled. One question is why the planning commission? Our code doesn't say that they have to go to the planning commission, but we brought many of these to the planning commission. The city's council's kind of changed over the years. For a long time, it was a vacation that we thought would be more complicated and it would be valuable for the council to have that additional thought process, especially from the planning commission who specializes in these kind of things. And this one certainly falls into that category where there's a little bit more going on than normal. Also, the planning commission has taken on a more proactive stance, and right-of-way vacations certainly falls within that. And then with the general types of things they look at in our code. So that's why the planning commission is looking at this. I want to talk about the affected area briefly. And if we get that map up.
Yeah, just a sec, let me share. Consent map, yeah.
Yeah, so before we schedule a public hearing, we're supposed to make sure that we have 2/3 of what's called the affected area, and that's envelope around the area to be vacated. And there's some distances in the statute of what that is. So 2/3 total area, and then 100% abutting. And what we've over the years have considered abutting has been those that abut along the side. So you see this waffle pattern. No, you can't see me. But I'll point up here, that way everybody can see. So you see this waffle pattern, these are the ones that have the consent just the dashed line without the waffle pattern are the ones in the affected area that don't have the consent. And I don't know if I started that logic back when I worked for the city of Klamath Falls, close to 20 years ago, or if it was with St. Helens. I've just done so many of these over the years. It all kind of blends in, but kind of the basis for us is with a street vacation, typically, if you draw a line down the middle, the right of way goes to each property. And so abutting means it can be, there's the potential of right of way acquisition. And if someone was not a petitioner, we would want to make sure that they agreed to having the right of way directly abutting their property. Now, there has been some question on whether or not property abutting a point, and this is only a point, I will add, there is a slight angle to here, so though the scale here suggests it's this entire line, it is only a point. It is only a point. Whether or not a point begets adjacency. And the thing is, so let's say that was an issue. Let's say that was a potential challenge. So what would the applicant do? They could take the risk of the challenge, or they could simply amend their area to be vacated to have a separation. And if adjacency is touching, that separation can be minute. Let's say it's an inch. Let's say it's 1/64th of an inch. That's enough to negate the adjacency. So it's an easily resolved issue. And that's the reason why we went to concerned about it. It's possible that we're wrong and it was just a bad habit that we've been conducting over the years. But that was kind of the thought process in that. So the overall staff recommendation. Now, this is in a central part of town. There's names on the petition that a lot of people know. A lot of people know the people in here. And this is always one of the challenges when we're dealing with street vacations is, you know, it's a small town, everybody knows each other. There's always that challenge. But the key thing as decision makers, remember the most important person, their first name is public and their second name is interest. You have to think, is the vacation prejudicing the public interest or not? Is it contrary to the public interest or not? And that's the key thing that needs to be looked at. And I as an overall summary, you know, we've gone through a lot of these over the years, and you know, we've spent a lot of time looking at it. And from a public interest standpoint, you know, we got pretty uncomfortable about it. And that's why our recommendation, at least as it stands now, notwithstanding review by the Planning Commission testimony, and of course, ultimately reviewed by the council, just a small area, which Jenny is pointing out there, the waffle pattern in front of 100 South First Street. That's the one place that you don't necessarily see a conflict with utilities, public views, public passageway, and things like that. Of course, you know, there'll probably be some debate ensuing, but that's kind of where we're starting at. So Jenny is going to go into a lot of the details, and then the final subject matter, public views, I'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll open it up for discussion and testimony.
Great, so I have the really fun job at deciphering the complex web of this map. So I'm gonna kind of go through each segment of the streets and talk about any transportation related impacts and then any utility related impacts. And all of that is to get to the conclusion that we're really only recommending a very small section that doesn't have all these conflicts with utilities and transportation plans and existing facilities and everything that Jacob just mentioned. So I'm gonna start with what I think is the easier of the streets, and that is South River Street and North River Street. So I'm gonna go through and talk about North River Street first. And so that is just this area that abuts 90 Columbia Boulevard. So kind of where I got my cursor. So first, we always look at what's our minimum right-of-way width standard for streets. So we start there. And both North River and South River are considered local streets. So local streets have a minimum right-of-way width of 50 feet normally. And the existing right-of-way is 80 in some areas. And so we've got this extra right-of-way width. And I'm gonna zoom in a little bit so that you can see the roadway itself. Because River Street's interesting. So there's a large bluff, as we know, that, you know, bisects the right-of-way itself. And this dark black line represents the roadway itself. And if you follow it, it's very skewed towards the east side of the right-of-way along River Street. And so what that means is the properties across from the subject property are not likely eligible for a similar right-of-way vacation request because the roadway is within what they would request to be vacated. So all that's to say, we've entertained street vacations along River Street on the east side because there's all of this surplus right-of-way where the roadway is not built. So we know the roadway is skewed towards the east side of the right-of-way, likely due to that steep slope. The River Street roadway varies between 24 and 34 feet. It's not consistent along River Street. So there's some areas where you have on-street parking and then there's some that don't. And then along the east side, we know there's a small 5-foot sidewalk, curb and gutter, but there's no sidewalk facilities along the bluff side, along the west side. So because the roadway is so skewed, just to the north of the proposal at the St. Helens Marina condos, a similar request of 25 feet was vacated in 1996. So I think that's important just to know what precedence has been along River Street. And then about 300 feet south, more recently, in 2020, 20 feet of the South River Street was vacated. Maybe you were on the commission and saw that. That was Steve Pegram proposal and a budding neighbor, and they got 20 feet vacated back. So similar requests along this area. So this petitioner is requesting 25 feet. And 25 feet would leave 55 feet of right-of-way remaining. So that's more than our minimum standard. And that also leaves enough room if the city were to ever want to construct a 5-foot sidewalk along the west side of River Street, that would still leave enough room to do so. It's pretty unlikely that the city would invest just because there's a sidewalk across the street, and it's also a very steep slope that would require retaining walls. But there is adequate room. So let's see, looking at other transportation related features. So maybe you've used it, but there is an existing gravel trail that connects the dead end gravel area of Columbia Boulevard down to South River Street. This is not the actual alignment. We don't have a survey alignment of that trail. And so it's important to know that without knowing the exact location, staff feels uncomfortable vacating any portion that gravel trail might be on. And then also of significance, the Parks and Trails Master Plan identifies this as a trail project to improve, because right now it's a very simple, narrow hiking trail, basically. And there could be some improvements that either widen it, pave it, put retaining walls in, and we don't know what those improvements might be. And so we get a little uneasy about vacating potential areas that we want to improve with trail projects. And so this is a particularly sensitive part of that trail connection along the North River Street side. See, so utilities. The public sanitary sewer line follows my cursor here. You'll see that it gets really close to the North River Street right of way. City engineering, if we at all entertain, which staff isn't recommending, if we at all entertain right of way along this area, city engineering requested 40 feet in length for a public utility easement so that they can get in there and maintain that line. It's extra long because of the slope and needing to, kind of buttress against the improvements or maintenance of that line.
Jenny, where is it?
Right here. See my cursor,
No,
Audrey?
no.
Let's
What
see.
street are you on?
So this is North River Street.
Oh, okay.
There's a manhole located on the Marina Condos property that the sewer line connects to. Yeah, Jacob can point to.
Right here.
Okay.
Yeah, this
You know, it's kind of a
that's the line
spaghetti way.
she's referring to.
Yeah.
Connected by those two dots.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if at any portion of North River Street was entertained for a vacation, city engineering requested at least 40 feet be maintained as a PUD, a public utility easement,
Right.
to maintain that line. Unlike that, along South River Street, there's just a private lateral that crosses the staff recommended area. There's enough room here for a 15-foot on center easement without impacting the suggested area to be vacated along the South River Street side. So there's no utility conflicts there. So that's North and South River Street. Because of this trail, staff doesn't recommend entertaining any portion of the North River Street side.
What is the PUD lines?
Yeah, we'll get to that. So that's just River Street. There's no power pole or aerial utilities along River Street in this area. There are in other areas. I'm gonna get to those.
Well, I'm going to well, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
and there are utility conflicts
Right.
with PV in other parts of this. Okay. So I think we'll move on to First Street. Let me get organized here. Okay. So North First Street, north of Columbia Boulevard, which is right here, is classified as a local street. South of Columbia, it's a collector. As we know, it takes up the majority of the 80-foot right-of-way as it's built. So that means it has a similar minimum right-of-way width of 50 feet. And it's currently 80. So the applicants in this case are requesting a total of 30 on each side. So that would leave a 20-foot right of way down the middle here where my cursor is.
A 20-foot street.
A 20-foot public right of way, yeah. So a couple things about this. So first I want to point out this yellow square. So this yellow square is important because I'm calling that the 80 by 80 intersection area in the staff report. And we don't want to vacate any portion of this area because there's sidewalk improvements and crosswalk treatments that are proposed in the corridor plan that would utilize that area. And then as we'll talk about later, there's other improvements along Columbia Boulevard that are proposed in the corridor plan. But as it relates to First Street, this little corner here is important for sidewalk extension, which currently terminates and doesn't connect to the sidewalk along the east side of First Street. So that area is sacred. Staff does not recommend that. So in the First Street right of way, this dotted line represents a gravel driveway that serves and is the sole access for 114 First Street here. So that dotted line is a gravel driveway. Beyond this, there is a very large cliff that has a slope of 47% at its steepest. So the roadway obviously terminates. There's a very steep slope here. So that's just an important component of this request.
You can see the roof of that pump station really well right there. Going back on the earlier conversation.
Yeah, you're elevated above another pump station. So staff notes in the staff report as it relates to transportation, we're not talking about utilities quite yet, that the applicant's stated purpose for the vacation is to develop or redevelop the abutting properties. So the zoning of the properties in question are apartment residential and Riverfront District Marina Subdistrict. Both of those zoning districts allow for apartment multifamily development. And so staff thinks it's important to think about access to those properties and making sure that there's an access that meets our minimum standards. There is no minimum public right-of-way access that is 20 feet wide. And so at a minimum, staff feels like our Skinny Street standard should be maintained, which is a 40-foot minimum right-of-way width. So Skinny Street standards are used when you're serving properties that are less than 200 average daily trips. That's about 20 single-family dwellings. So given that this small segment of First Street is only serving a couple properties, I think it's safe to say that at a minimum, a 40-foot right-of-way width would be maintained to serve the redevelopment of properties that allow for multifamily. That is barring all other conversations we're gonna have about utilities and other things, but just from a transportation lens, roadway lens, I want to get that out there. So in addition to considering minimum right-of-way width to maintain, we also have to look at topography and usability. So there's this circle here that says feasible non-motorized access. And that's important because our corridor master plan recommends a pedestrian bike trail through this area. And there's some photos I'm gonna pull up in the staff report that show what that area looks like. That Jacob took when the triplex was being developed by Steve Toski sitting in the audience. Okay, let's see here. Okay. So these two photos side by side, same area, different time frame. So this is the triplex property that was mentioned earlier. There's a retaining wall here. This is before the triplex property was built, and you can kind of see, as the vegetation's been removed, that this is a more usable slope to be able to improve with a trail or a pedestrian path, bike path. And so that's what that little circle on the map is indicating, is this area here. And it connects nicely with improved right-of-way, which is just down below on the cliff that serves the triplex. So this is public right-of-way here, and it serves as a logical connection to meet the intent of the corridor master plan. So that being said, staff does not recommend vacating any portion just from a transportation lens of the west side of North First Street, because it connects logically to this feasible non-motorized access area just below the cliff. So that's what that circle is representing.
There are little circles and lines on the side, there's a bunch of them.
These guys, yeah, so these are power poles. It's incomplete, so staff drew one here that it wasn't in our GIS system, but that's approximately where there is another one. And then the other symbols, like this, we'll talk about in a bit. We're just asking about these guys. Yeah, power poles.
Our data is old, but in about a month, we'll be able to have talk about our shiny new data, so.
Okay. So that's the transportation. Now let's talk utilities on first, because it's a doozy. Okay, so along the west side of North First, so the non-river side, there is a CRPUD pole here that spans and connects to this pole here. So it spans the entire length of the right of way to be vacated. Comcast also commented that they have facilities on those same poles, which is common. They often have joint aerial facilities. And the PUD stated, and hopefully you read this, that their preference is to require at the owner's expense relocation of the facilities, including utility poles, lines, guys, and anchors, and any other equipment, because easements add a layer of difficulty, especially for expansion, maintenance, and access during an outage or an emergency type situation. That's pretty explicit language. They are not in favor of just putting a PUD or a PUE over a public utility easement over any right of way to be vacated because it causes headache with their maintenance staff. And they were explicit in their comments about that. Comcast also added to that and said, requested that the poles be relocated and that a PUE be provided if the street vacation is granted. So we have both utility providers saying, please don't vacate this. If you do, please require relocation of the poles because we don't like easements. And that comes into play on the other side, on the east side of North First Street as well. So these poles are actually CenturyLink. So for whatever reason, CenturyLink has two separate poles. They're not sharing the same poles. And we weren't able to get comments from them. We had some older comments back in 2020 when the same applicant was considering a smaller vacation request that just abutted his property. And they said that they could give a cost for what it would be to relocate those poles. And so I don't have an explicit comment from them. However, there is a public water line. So that's that blue line that runs the entire length of the right of way to be vacated as well. So that water line would either have to be relocated or a PUE would need to be over the entire area. Northwest Natural also commented, we don't have their data in our GIS system. And so Northwest Natural has a gas line that runs about 100 feet north of Columbia Boulevard. So it's not the entire length, but it does serve 114 North First Street. And they didn't note an option for relocation. And so they would also require a public utility easement over that area. So there's a web of utilities. The last thing on North First Street, so this pump station, which we talked about a little bit earlier, there's a photo in the staff report I'm going to pull up, but this line that I'm trying to trace here represents asphalt that serves the back side of the building. I don't think that fully represents the scale of the asphalt. As you'll see in this photo. Let's see which page that is. Mind me. Okay, other way. So this is standing at the bottom of that cliff, and from the building face over to this retaining wall, it's about 19 feet.
The cliff is on your right in that photo.
Yeah, so the area to be vacated is in this area, going this direction. And so at a minimum, staff needs to access and maintain this pump station, there's no question. This paved area is used to get into the building and bring maintenance vehicles. And so the majority of this area is actually in the proposed vacation area. So that's this area right here where I have my cursor. So that, in addition to all the PUEs that we talked about for all the easements that we would need if this were to be vacated, this area would have to be excluded altogether from the right of way to be vacated. We would want to retain that as public right of way for perpetual access to that pump station.
Let me interject really quickly. There was one of the concerns about adjacency affected area was this public right of way. And it's public right of way, it's not real property, and that's why the right of way itself does not count towards that affected area.
And it's not uncommon to have pump stations in public right of way as opposed to their own properties. Okay, so I think we can talk about Columbia Boulevard, finally. So I'm gonna wrap this up on public views and then toss it back to Jacob, because Scenic Views, and you got a memo that was handed out that adds to the staff report that was not included in the packet. So we'll close with Jacob. Okay. So the easy part first, along the northern part of Columbia Boulevard, there are no utilities that conflict. And it's very close to the the property line. And so a PUE would be needed or relocation of those poles would be needed. There's also a large vehicular wayfinding sign located on the south side of Columbia Boulevard. There really isn't a good spot for relocation of that sign. And so, staff doesn't recommend vacating a portion of this area anyway. Okay, so corridor master plan, we'll pull that up now. Okay, so this is the main corridor master plan concept that's referenced in the staff report a couple of different times. And the full excerpts are included in the staff report too, and all the text that corresponds with them. But when we were working on the corridor master plan in 2015, the consultants at the time, traffic consultants and engineers, identified this location as an outstanding special opportunity area, is what it was called. And they said that the termination of Columbia Boulevard into this scenic view was worth putting an improvement on. And so they proposed a couple of different improvements, namely a staircase to River Street. Now, this design shows a certain width of that roadway, but it is concept. So in the staff report, we're very particular to say that this is a 30% level design. It wasn't based on topography. It's just a concept. And so staff, without a further refinement of design, topography, and a survey, feels very uncomfortable basing any sort of decision on a concept. We need more information. We need a better design. And so overall, staff is not in support of vacating any portion of right-of-way that may end up needing to be used to implement an adopted transportation plan for this area. So that's the significance of the corridor plan as it relates to Columbia Boulevard. There's also other improvements in the corridor plan. We talked about the one right here at the intersection that would utilize portions of that 80 by 80 intersection for sidewalks. And then we also talked about the bike path along First Street that would connect cyclists down to River Street.
Is that what that large rectangle is?
Which one?
North, right there, yeah. What is that?
No, so that is, that's, I think that's current, it's supposed to represent a driveway.
Yeah, it's just a hypothetical driveway.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
At one time, that was part of Bill 5 and it was recommended as a viewpoint that was ADA accessible.
oh, really? There was an older
Yeah.
plan.
Yeah, that was goal 5.
So also in the text of the corridor master plan, it talks about how if vehicular access to these two abutting properties were ever not needed, that this Columbia Boulevard right-of-way could be transformed into a pedestrian-only plaza, which I think demonstrates the importance of this area as a public use area that preserves views. It provides a pedestrian amenity, and you're elevated, so you get views of Sand Island, the marina down below, Mount Hood. I think it's just an important area. We can't ignore the improvements in the corridor plan. And so I think that leads us into Jacob's bit of conversation about scenic views. before that, I wanted to note that in Title 19, the comp plan, there are references to scenic areas and public views. And one of the goals in the comp plan talks about preserving for the public benefit outstanding scenic areas, and talks about how it's the policy of the city of St. Helens to balance development rights of property owners and protection of public views of the Columbia River, Scappoose Bay, and Multnomah Channel. And so I think we have other things we can pull from other than just the corridor plan. It is in our comprehensive plan. This is clearly a public benefit, and we would not want to use the term in the statute prejudice public interest by vacating right of way that could be used as an overlook. So this is another concept in the corridor plan. Again, just note it says subject to change. You know, this is concept. So we don't have further refinement of this area, and we should not vacate portions of right of way that could be used to construct this.
That's right. 90 Columbia Boulevard on the property line.
It's very close, yeah, and you can see that here.
Okay.
Yeah, the applicant provided a map that's in your packet that also illustrates that too.
So on that topic of scenic views, Jacob also passed out this memo. You wanna?
Yeah, so as what typically happens with these, there's a lot of details. And then it becomes time for the staff report to be due, and we get through it. And then after the staff report's done, that's when I start thinking about it. Because those details are done, that's when your mind starts kind of wandering. And I remember at the time I was thinking about this, and I was really busy and I just wanted to get it done. But more recently I thought about it. So I went out there in light of the city's new policies. Now, some of these things we've talked about, have been around for 10 years. The city has had view preservation stuff since the 1970s. And so, this is a value that the city has had for several decades. And as Jenny pointed out, the comprehensive plan talks about views of the river, Scappoose Bay, Multnomah Channel. Of course, in this case, we're talking about the river. So I was kind of thinking about, there's only so many places along the waterfront that's publicly accessible. And so I thought about, well, if someone was enjoying this area, ideally you would have a panoramic view, because it's elevated and it gives you a little different perspective than some of the other waterfront areas that are accessible to the public. And so what I did is I went out there and I kind of, all right. And I focused on looking south, because looking north, there's a lot of other things, compelling reasons for considering the vacation or not. But in our staff report, we recommended, the one place that we recommended that we could potentially vacate was south of that dashed line that you can just faintly see there. But I wanted to make sure that wouldn't result in a visual wall. And that doesn't mean buildings, it could be plants and things like that too. And if you have it as right of way, you maintain control, including vertical shrubbery. So what this arrow represents, standing right there, is a view of the flagpole. So when I went out there, I wanted to kind of see something so I could connect the two dots to get kind of an idea of angle. And so this illustrates the white line is approximately the current property line, the yellow line is the approximate requested vacated area, and then the red line is looking at that flagpole. So if we go to the next picture, here's the reason I picked the flagpole, is it was a good, it was almost on the fringe of the available panoramic view. Now, you're probably not going to chip away rock, and so we didn't go far beyond that. But the thing is, what is behind the view of the flag? It's that river. It's what our comprehensive plan identifies as a value, a public value for the city. And so if we go to the next map, I was estimating, well, what would we want to keep? And this is based on the area that staff recommends approving. Basically, we think a bite should be taken out of that, just to make sure we're not compromising the maximum public view possible from this area.
So this was the original map. Just showing this is a blown up version of the staff recommendation with a small pizza slice taken out
Yeah,
to protect that panoramic view when you're standing at the end of Columbia Boulevard looking south.
so that was, and that picture was taken this morning. This is dated today. Now, aside from that area, Columbia Boulevard in itself, the right of way, given the importance of it and maintaining that swath for view shed is important. And, one way to maintain that is by keeping it as public right of way. So public views is part of the puzzle amongst some of the other things as well. So I think that's enough of our blabbing.
You guys did an amazing job, and all the details and everything.
So, I certainly, ask any questions before testimony.
I do want to talk about the actual decision making.
Yeah.
You mentioned that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned at the beginning, this is a decision by the council. We have not officially scheduled the public hearing. In the staff report, it talks about being in July, but we haven't scheduled it. So, that could change. But ultimately, this is the council's decision, not the planning commission's. But the planning commission will give a recommendation. And for the sake of organization for public testimony, I think we do our normal
Applicant.
favor, neutral, opposed, applicant, favor, neutral, opposed, and rebuttal. The applicant should have that
Do we
opportunity.
4 applicants?
There are 4, yeah.
Yeah, they may be represented just by these gentlemen here.
Okay, why don't we, please come up.
I can put up anything you'd like on the screen too, if you need maps or
I'm putting up just the vacation.
map maybe, or,
Or the.
Or I have your
one that you were
survey.
showing all the details.
oh, okay, utilities map, okay,
We have the
survey one.
the neat stuff provided in electronic form as well. I don't know if you want to put that up, but
Yeah, just let me know.
that may be for some of these folks.
Also, I can just give you these and pass them down.
Sure.
So I guess first you want introductions. Most everybody here knows me, but people out here that don't know me. Keith Locke, I live at 90 Columbia Boulevard. And just for the record, I've lived there almost 4 years. And I've been just retired from city council a year and a half ago. I was on city council for 20 years. I do want to apologize because I don't know, a lot of you here know that I went through cancer, but I don't know if you're aware of what chemo brain is, but 23 years ago, everything that was in my brain went to the cloud, and sometimes I gotta really grab for it to get back again. So if I miss anything, that's what it is. So anyway, being on city council, I specifically waited until I got off city council because I didn't want to look like it was a council favor do this, and that's why we're sitting here today. This idea has been thought about by myself for probably 30 years now. In fact, when I first bought the property, I looked at it, what could be here in the future. And of course, it has a historic house on it, and I first fell in love with the house until I started working on the house. This is almost 130 years old now. It's been rebuilt 3 or 4 times, added on to, tore down, added on to, tore down. It had a fire in the 30s. It was built before electricity and plumbing. So it is a money pit. And it's also been a rental for probably 50 years, which adds also to the detriment of a house. So I kind of lost interest in saving the house and looked at it as what could be here at this property, because I feel it's one of the nicest properties in St. Helens also. Been there for 40 years. I know every inch of it. And so looking at it, I go, man, it's terrible that I'm sitting here hogging this whole view to myself. It needs to be shared with a lot of people. And as Audrey talked about, was that like 30 years ago, Audrey? I'm thinking.
Yeah.
We had a committee called the Riverfront Committee that Audrey and I served on.
Goal 5, part of Goal 5.
And something we haven't talked about here is there used to be a one-way road that came from the marina, came up along this edge and came up Columbia Boulevard. That was the exit from the marina. And because of that one-way road came up here, it went halfway out into the usable roadway. And so there was only one lane on the east side of River Street. And at the time, so they decided, the city fathers decided that they would get rid of that road, but it was kind of controversial because everybody used that road. So they formed a public committee like we always do and go, well, we'll just have this committee and they can decide for us. And that's where we went. And so part of that, as Audrey was talking about, was our recommendation was a viewpoint here. Well, I've been thinking about that viewpoint for 30 years. It's not new to me at all. So, originally, I really didn't have the intent of getting that much property. And right now it looks like a huge, probably the biggest land grab since my great-great-grandfather got a homestead act here in Oregon 150 years ago. So, but being on city council, and I don't know how many of you guys followed me on city council, but I'm very pro-active as far as the city goes. And so right now there's the big house, my house, is actually 3 apartments. It's been 3 apartments for 50, 60 years. The small house I just actually purchased about 10 years ago. Had a chance to purchase it because it was broke off the land in 1952, I believe, is when that house was built. So I said, well, this, there needs to be a development here. And so I started looking at it, and you see my house sits right on 2 property lines. And so when you start looking at, and then I found out that I can't rebuild those houses because it has to be multiple family houses on there. So anyway, if you look at tearing the houses down and then look at the setbacks, it makes a fairly small footprint for developing some prime riverfront property. So I started looking at it, well, what are the possibilities here? And well, let's send it to an engineer and see what they can come up with. And then I had a meeting, which is I'm a little confused about, but we had a staff meeting 6 months ago. It's been a long time. Months, years just fly away anymore, but anyway. So we talked about a lot of these concerns, and a lot of them I thought we could work through with whatever the case would be. And so I started getting ready for this meeting, and then I didn't get any information from the city. So last week I came down and found out that, well, here's this packet, and but they don't send it out to applicants on a vacation like this. So I just found out about this last week and presented to myself and my colleague here, this is Tracy Brown, by the way. He's from City of Sandy. He's retired, their city planner. He's retired 5 years ago, 4 years ago, something like that.
I can introduce myself.
Anyway. So anyway, we looked at it and got an engineer, and there's a possibility, not that this is, but there's a possibility of up to, if vacations were granted, just on my property, not counting the other properties, but on my property, there's a possibility of 16 units on there. Now, with just the property I have, I think I may get 8 units on there. And this is where I put on my counselor hat and what's good for the city. You guys are all aware of the urban renewal district, right? You know how it works. So tax value on those 2 houses right now, I pay a little over $5,000 a year property taxes on the 2 houses. You put 16 units on there and you got yourself about $150,000 a year taxes. So $145,000 a year is going to go into the urban renewal district if those units were built. So I've heard issues about people talking about what's the city get out of this. I heard, well, the city doesn't get anything out of this. Well, that's not true. Over time, the city makes way more than I make out of this. 25 years left in urban renewal, you're probably looking at, I don't know, $2.5 million, something like that. Tax revenue that goes into the urban renewal district. So that's, why we're trying to work with you guys and staff to come up with, how can we work through this? We've talked about certain things. I've already spent probably almost $30,000 on engineering, surveys, topographies, finding out where everything's at, find out this and that. Already talked to CenturyLink, the 2 poles that are on my property. It's $15,000 to move those 2 poles over to the other existing poles. So already contacted them. Everything there, the gas line only serves my property. Well, the gas line doesn't have to go anywhere because it's right next to the property. It's a moot subject. The water line probably should be moved over to the center of the road anyway, because that's where it ends up downstream from it anyway. So all those things I believe can be worked out. And you're talking about the view. You go down Columbia Boulevard, the actual, because of the new setbacks on the new buildings there, you're only going to lose a foot here and there. And as far as the viewpoint, let me talk about that a little bit, because the viewpoint was very dear to my heart because I was on the committee that recommended it in the first place. So I talked about to staff about this and whatnot. So the viewpoint is important because it's part of the deal and part of the transportation plan. So that's when I says, well, Columbia Boulevard, the condition on Columbia Boulevard is that the developer put in the viewpoint and the stairway. on the River Street. And the reason, there's a good reason to have a stairway there versus the trail that's there. And the trail that's there, by the way, I put in myself. It was never there, ever. It's part of the old road that goes down there, but it was destroyed when they took the road out. For the first 30-some years, I had a trail that came up right past my house from down below. That friends, and back 40 years ago, everybody was a friend and neighbor down there. I was kind of the overseer of the marina during the ice storms and whatnot. People would call me and ask me if their boat was still afloat. So it's kind of nice because I got a few free salmon, I suppose, as cars came up the one-way road. So I usually had fresh fish in the freezer. Anyway, so that's all of these. I knew there was going to be conditions on, and I'm willing to work with those conditions for the good of the city. So anyway, earlier today, we've kind of been planning on this, but like I said, since we found out a lot of these things that we didn't think were huge issues came up. And so we would like to see a continuance of this meeting until possibly next month. Other than we'll give you as much information as we can today, but I believe we have more information that you need to see in order to make a better decision on this. And so I'd say we'll talk about it today, and then at the end of the meeting, you can determine whether you want to continue this next month or whether you just want to send it on to council. So at this time, I'll send it over to Tracy, and he can kind of talk about our project a little bit.
Yeah, thank you. So again, my name is Tracy Brown, and I was formerly in Jacob's position at the city of Sandy for 15 years. I was planning director about 5 years ago. And I didn't do a lot of vacations, but I did several vacations. I guess I would address Mr. Toshi's point, and I have the same experience and interpretation that Jacob was talking about, that the property is adjacent if it's to the side of the vacation, because typically those roads were taken out of the property to the side. It's not property downstream from that road vacation. Mr. Toshi has a part of vacation that is adjacent to his property, but this isn't one of them. These requests aren't one of them. That's my feeling. The other comment you received is from the I think somebody on the Parks Board. There's some comments about the Parks Board. I guess it was regarding the trail that's there that he mentioned. I guess it was our impression that with the improvements at the end of Columbia Boulevard and this overlook and the access down to River Street below, that the need for this, Keith and I walked down there today, this pretty poor condition trail would effectively would go away. There would be really not any purpose for it on the side of that hillside. So it was our impression that with any improvements, that would go away. It is correct that if this property were vacated, it would be in the right of way, but it's kind of a chicken and egg thing. So as each of the, I kind of looked at each of the items, and he kind of referred to this, but it's always been his impression and mine as somebody that's helped him with this, that the improvements associated with the viewpoint would be part of the development of this property. And really his property is the keystone property, part of the vacation. The other property owners were just included as kind of sure we can include you, but really it was kind of Keith's effort. He did all the legwork to gather the signatures. So it's always been his impression that those improvements would be refined through his development, and we don't have a specific development, approved or refined plan, it would be part of that. I guess one thing I would do is address, I did walk down to the end of Columbia and looked to the south. I mean, it was my, and this is only my vision as a planner with 30 years of experience standing at the end of that road. That road currently, Columbia Boulevard, kind of slopes down like this, where it terminates in the blackberries. It would be my impression that that platform would be elevated, and there would be more of a, a grand kind of feature there. And so I don't think it is fair to say, standing at the end, looking to the south, that picture would be a lot different if that were elevated. I think it would probably be 5 feet at least above that current elevation, because that road currently slopes down. I don't think you'd want it sloping down. You'd want it to be leveled out, filled up, and then even elevated. So it creates this more grand viewing platform. So I can just go through our little sketch here a little bit. If you pull it with River Street facing up, we kind of looked at the access, primary access, to be off of Columbia Boulevard, and that's kind of shown in the corridor master plan. As you recall, there was that driveway that goes in off of Columbia Boulevard. And so it'd be similar to that. And then our vision is that the access on North First would either be not approved or would be for emergency only, and it could be one way out rather than a full street profile. But those details are to be determined. We recognize that. On the North River Street part of it, there was note of the city sewer line, and it does show up there. We were curious the need for 40 feet of additional, bringing that back. Typically, the public utility easement is 15 feet wide, centered on the utility for a single utility. And so 40 feet seemed to kind of excessive for that purpose. And really, as you see on there, all of the streets will have a setback to them. So on River, it would be a 10-foot setback. On Columbia, I believe a 20-foot setback. And on First, there would be a 10-foot setback. So some of that requested vacation wouldn't be built on, it would be in setback. And so maybe there's a way to, I guess, compromise in that sense to provide some level of vacation to accommodate the setbacks necessary for some additional development on this property. We do acknowledge that North First, there are a lot of utilities. As Keith mentions, he's already looked on his side, and it would be feasible to relocate the utilities on his side of North First Street with no problem. So again, it kind of brings up, is it the best thing to deny it, or is there a way to allow it to go forward with certain conditions in place that would, be contingent on future development plan, contingent on some of these improvements, and a refined plan for the Columbia Street overlook and the relocation of these utilities. So it's without any vacation, likely that nothing will happen. With some level of vacation or some assurances that if there are certain things that could be done, there might be some level of vacation. And so it's more of a working together approach to accomplish, a city goal of the overlook. In some ways it's a city goal to see those nice views enjoyed by others than just Keith, other property owners or owners of units. he would likely do these as condo units rather than multifamily. They're kind of the same thing rather than apartments. So that's kind of our position. So when we got the staff report, I got it Thursday or Friday of last week, and there was quite a bit in there. As you said, Vice Chair, that their staff did a great job of looking at all of these details. We haven't really had a chance to digest all of those details, and we're doing the best we can with the time we've had. So I guess with that, I don't know if so our request, I guess, would be, as Keith mentioned, to either continue the hearing so we can sort out some of the additional recommendations by staff, or if this request can't be accommodated, then we ask that you approve it and require easements in certain locations and or conditions to tie the vacation request to certain development objectives. I'd be glad to answer any questions. You have questions about our plan here. And again, we haven't gone through a pre-application or design review of this plan, and that would need to occur, but we didn't want to, he didn't want to spend the money to do that until he had some assurances of what his billing envelope would be. Appreciate your time.
Any questions? Great. Move on. I don't think we can address it over right now. I think we should hear testimony. I think we need to discuss that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Any other applicants that would come up and speak for this?
I don't believe there's any here.
In favor? Vacation? Seeing none. Neutral? One way or the other. Seeing none. Anybody in opposition to this vacation? A few hands there. Okay. Let's just start at the end and work our way through.
Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to address you. My name is Brenda Heron-Kanega, and I'm a resident of the city of St. Helens, and I oppose this request for vacation. In terms of what testimony I previously heard, sure, tax revenue is nice. Yes, we do need development, but this isn't just a matter of dollars and cents. This is about the health of our community. And I appreciate city planner Ration going out this morning to take the photos. However, I would add that this is springtime and therefore there's a lot of foliage. And so I think we would also want to be looking at when the foliage is gone, come fall and winter, we may need expanded land for a viewpoint. And I am thrilled to know that the people who may not be as mobile as others were considered for this overlook. That has long been a concern of mine. Our town is very hilly, and while that does provide wonderful things, it does make it more difficult for those with mobility issues to have the same views that we do. And as part of that, again, going back to health, in the Environmental Health Perspectives Journal of July of 2018, they did a research article as found on the National Library of Medicine's webpage that's run by the United States government. There was a study titled Associations Between Living Near Water and Risk of Mortality Among Urban Canadians. And while at first that sounds, well, that's Canada, what does that have to do with us? One of the primary authors was from Oregon State University down in Corvallis. And they said that their objective was to determine whether residential proximity to large natural water features, e.g. lakes, rivers, coasts, blue space, was associated with cause-specific mortality. The results, as given by the abstract, are that they found significant reduced risks of mortality in the range of 12 to 17% associated with living within 250 meters, roughly 800 feet, in comparison with living further away among all causes of death examined except with external accidental causes. Protective effects were found to be higher among women and all older adults than among other subjects, and protective effects were found to be the highest against deaths from stroke and respiratory related causes. I believe that we should do everything in our power to be preserving the health of our residents, and that which we do today is going to matter 50 years in the future. When we look at the history of our town, do we want to say, well, yeah, we compromised. We did a little here and a little there. What is compromise going to cost us? Sometimes compromise is great. Sometimes it ends up costing us more in the end than we were ever prepared to give. And I agree with the idea of being up above. There are so many times I have been in a kayak and watched cormorants during this fall and winter, or the osprey feeding their young, watching the fish sometimes get carried away, sometimes get dropped or get missed entirely. And the way to see it is so different when you're high up than down below. It's one thing to look up at the osprey, it's another thing to look them in the eye. And so I really believe for the sake of our town's physical, mental, and emotional future, we need to preserve every square inch of this. As my grandfather was fond of saying, and I'm sure many grandfathers did, buy land, they're not making any more of it. If we give up this land, it's gone. And I don't believe we should do that based on the future of our town and its mortality and morbidity. Let's be healthier. Let's keep our river.
Yes, I'm on. Thank you for taking the time to speak with you today. My name is John Wakert. My home is at 137 North River Street. My property comes up with the landowners making a request for the city property. A few months back, I was presented with a document to review and asked to sign and provide that I'm good with the proposal. At this time, I'm requesting that I rescind my signature. I thought about it, and I'm not in favor of the city giving away prime property without compensation. I understand it. As I understand it, talking with one of the landowners, plans to develop for condos. Seems they pocket all the money and the city is out. The other reason is there's no proposed plan at this time as to what the buildings may look like. I'm worried that I have a concrete retaining wall 10 feet behind my home, perhaps reducing my property value. Today, there's grass, trees, and the deer rest there. The concern is the trail that leads to River Street. The city has a nice trail system that it's working on for years. The landowner next to the trail says that would stay. But once he sells the property, the access will be cut off. There's no longer city access. The home at the end of the road is sad that such an icon of the neighborhood for 100 years will be torn down. If they want to develop their property, I'm not against that. It's just not including public property. Allowing this request to go transfer to go forward, I asked, is the best use for property and our city and the people it serves. Thank you. I'm the one right next to the pump house. Right here. And it does come on every Tuesday at 10 o'clock.
In the morning or in the day or
Yeah.
night?
Put my glasses on. It's too old.
Thank you.
My name is Jerry Belcher. I live at 105 Belton Road, St. Helens, Oregon. And I want to put a disclaimer in before we go any farther. These handouts were made and copied using no city equipment or paper. Okay? I want everyone to know that. So,
You want to be reimbursed, Jerry?
no, I did not ask for that.
Do you have an extra one of those?
I sent you one about a month ago. It's the same thing we've been going over. These guys know.
Oh, it's the urban trail thing.
The urban trail
Oh, okay,
thing.
all right, okay.
Yeah. Exactly. I didn't really write out a whole lot here, but myself and a number of other people have been advocating for an urban trail for a long time. And we're hoping the city will eventually get that done. This urban trail will go through and by actually 6 parks and by you can see Sand Island from it. So I'm here to advocate for urban trails, public access, and scenic views. I believe that if this is approved and gone through, it will affect all of those. So urban trails, public access, and scenic views. The number one physical activity for adults shown by surveys is walking. Even a survey that the city did in their last master plan that was, Jen, how old is that? I don't know.
15.
Yeah, it's a little old, but walking is one of the things that older people do. Currently, there is a trail that passes through and by the property. And I listened to Keith talk, and it's true that there could be a sidewalk that goes down, and there could be a pedestrian lane down below or a crosswalk down below that could mitigate that. But still, yeah, people that are advocating for this particular urban trail feel like, eventually, once this trail gets in place, because we have lots of trails in St. Helens, they're just not connected together. That's the big problem we have. And this proposal that we have, connects the trails together. So eventually, hopefully there'll be a trail that goes up to the viewpoint there. And I am really opposed to vacate any property along Columbia Boulevard there, because I foresee in the future that there will be because the urban trail passes right below this, and I can see eventually that the urban trail could go right up to this area, to this viewpoint, and I think it'd be really a great thing for our city. That's pretty much it. I think that this property belongs to the city of St. Helens. I think if we, especially in my opinion, the property that's right along Columbia Boulevard where the scenic view will be and the trail that goes down, I think that if we give that property up, that, somewhere in the future we'll regret it. The St. Helens has been here for 150 years. Hopefully it'll be here for another 1,000 years, but
who's to say where we're going to be in 50 years, 100 years? You know, look at the, you know, the river walk, which this trail will also include the river walk. I didn't count that as one of the 6 parks and things. So that's where I stand on this. And I know that the other people that helped develop this, I know that all of them stand and feel the same way. In fact, some of them may give some testimony later on.
Thanks for your testimony. Next. In the back of the room.
Go Howard, go ahead.
Okay, I'll take my beer. Howard Blumenthal. I just want to say that some of the things that we talk about doing in our parks and trails master plan, view corridors and stuff, sometimes we're looking way out into the future, may not even happen in our lifetime. So to give up a public right of way such as that, when you're driving down Columbia Boulevard, it's such an open expanse, to narrow it to say, oh, we'll put a little viewing platform at the end. Once again, we were talking about that it could be ADA accessible. Once you start narrowing the street in that area, where will people park? And that's the other one, when they were talking about recently, that they're gonna build the boat and fishing dock down at Great Cliffs Park. They were discussing that somehow up in some of that area that there may be a possibility of additional parking. So I'm hoping that that wouldn't be any of the area. If it gets vacated, would we be losing possible parking in the future?
Yeah, and I'll clarify, this area hasn't been talked about as parking related to Sand Island. That's right of way
Farther.
around the St. Helens Parade area,
Which
which I know this is close, but
okay, I just knew they were kind of saying, and I didn't know if the streets were mainly just parking. The trail is used that comes up there at an angle. Sometimes a trail could be more advisable for somebody that's lightly disabled than having to do a bunch of stairs. So we need to look at that if we were to turn it into just a staircase versus a trail that goes up across a slope. Also, if you vacate it, what would happen to the basalt cliffs there? We have a lot of beautiful basalt cliffs in St. Helens, and I would hate to lose more of the basalt face and have a building right on the very tippy edge of it, leaning over it where we have the basalt cliffs. And mainly it's just, we need to maintain our public viewing spaces and that type of thing. That area right there is an incredible opportunity for a high viewpoint to look out over things. Down at the other end of the bluff, we're not as tall in that area down where I am, and depending upon what future development happens on the Riverfront property, a lot of the views down there may actually go away with tall buildings at that end. So with this one, much out in front now, that really to me is a more important thing to maintain that view thing. The other thing would be is that what would be the time lag if you got rid of the trail that goes down this way? What guarantee do we have that we'd end up with another trail in that area in a reasonable amount of time? So
thank you, Howard. Steve?
My wife's coming up to join me, Robin, native daughter of St. Helens, Steve Toski. We live at 135 North First Street, right by the pump station. I want to thank very much Jenny and Jacob for the wonderful job that they did in bringing forward some of the massive problems with this project. I want to begin by saying the reason why I had originally, when this thing was first proposed, why we had originally decided that we were not going to support it as a budding property owner. Frankly, I didn't even know the difference between a budding and adjoining. I just thought this isn't in the best public interest at all. These lands are, without a doubt, some of the most valuable lands, not only in St. Helens, but probably in the state of Oregon. Not only for this generation, but all generations to come. I completely echo the sentiments of Brenda and Jerry about the importance of public spaces and maintaining public spaces for the health of our community. Robin and I are walkers. We walk all the time. We walk throughout the city. And the taking away of any public open space that can be used for recreation is extremely detrimental to the public interests, especially as our city continues to grow. You can imagine the pressures that people are under with their everyday living and walking, and being able to find a place to respite in different places is incredibly important. And that would include not only this overlook, but also the area which abuts our property, which is along North First Street. When we were thinking about buying that property from Wayne Wygant, I had met with Jacob, and Jacob told me, you know, there's going to be a bike trail or a public trail down right in front of the property right there. And Robin and I said, that's fine. We want to buy a property where there will be a public trail. Some people would say they don't want that to happen. We said that's part of what we think the riverfront is all about. It's about energy, it's about life, it's about people accessing the river. And so when we bought our property, we understood that our property would have a public trail abutting it right there with skateboarders, bicyclists, people pushing strollers, kids going down to fish, another area for access to the river. And so when I heard that they were gonna try and have the city give away its property, I said no. I said no to this thing. And I want to echo what Jenny said, that we're balancing the rights of property owners with the public views. The property owner in this case is the city of St. Helens. The city of St. Helens has no interest in developing this property whatsoever. And so why are we even thinking about giving up our public views to enhance the ability of a property owner to develop 16 units instead of 8 units? We're going to sacrifice precious view land that you can see for miles, that people sometimes say is the most beautiful thing they've ever seen. And we're going to give that away, give it to somebody so they can build bigger buildings. Where is that in the public interest? I have not heard one bit of testimony that any of this is in the public interest. And the applicant hasn't put any evidence in that this is in the public interest. And so we are against it. We are against it because it's against the public interest. And now I'm going to turn to our legal rights. You know, once this application started, I took a closer look at the law, and we are an abutting property owner. We own 131, 135, 139 North First Street in feet. Our property touches the property that's going to be abutted. And Jenny, can you put up just the
Is this the map you want? I can blow it up a little.
yeah, and then I kind of done some exhibits. I don't know if you can access those, but you can see this corner right here. And it right here. And then I'd done a packet. I don't know if Jacob gave you the packet or not.
Yeah, we do have it electronically as well.
Okay, so yeah, if you could project like something that looks like this.
The photo? Sure.
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Do you remember the title of it?
Yeah, project any of the exhibits that say, well, let's just go one at a time, okay? Let's just do,
I have abutting properties that.
let's do 1A, legal description. It's in, I don't know.
Is it one of the JPEGs?
It's 1A is a PDF. Sorry.
Exhibit one.
Oh, here it is.
Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna talk about legalities here. And I think, I don't want to get bogged down in legalities because this is a disaster for the public. But I think the city needs to understand that we have an absolute legal right that will defeat this thing, period. And so, west 30 feet of North First Street, Columbia right-of-way abutting lots 22, 21, and the south half of lot 20, block 16. So that's in the legal description in the petition. And so when you look at the law on this, what the law says is that you're supposed to put out the legal description, and then people sign off on it, and then it comes to whether or not all abutting property owners have consented. If all abutting property owners have not consented, this cannot move forward. It cannot move forward in any way, shape, or form. There's no modifications. This isn't a negotiation. There are other ways that people can have the city itself do abutting, not abutting, but to have it vacated. But that's not the procedure we're in. We're in this procedure. So then, if you could go to, so the legal description is the south half of lot 20, block 16. The south half of lot 20, block 16. And you could go to exhibit 1, planning department file map, please. And then move it up this way. Let's drag it that way. There we go. Keep going a little bit. So we own tax lot 11,900. This is lot 20, and this is the south half because we got the south that way and the north is that way. We own the north half. According to the map, which is the public record on this, there's 29 feet. The lot is divided in half. We own the north half, and this vacation is considering the south half. So by the legal description, we touch that point. We own it and we touch it. And it's not all about touching, but I want to just show you that our legal rights are of a landowner that touches and we abut. And then, let's see. Okay, so then, let's see, I think I did, and I've shown you that, and then let's do, just do like photos exhibit 2A to exhibit 6. So I kind of went down, I took a picture of 2A. There we go, that's perfect. So what I did is I went out and there's a stake on that corner that somebody came out and surveyed recently. And then I went out and I put tape so that I could physically show you and the council, if it ever goes to there, what abutting means. I mean, this is our property here, which is the triplex. This is an edge of it. And then here is the property that's requested to be vacated. It touches right there. And then go ahead and go to the next picture. There's
So
a
for the
few.
people in the audience, it's the rock and then
Yeah, it's the rock and then the place on the other
the
side.
triangle directly.
Yeah, that there is what they're requesting that to be vacated, which vacated means it becomes theirs. It's now not the city's anymore. It is the landowners. It's going to be the Dillard Trusts, frankly. And they can do with it whatever the law says they want to be able to do with it. So can you just go to, I don't know, one of the other ones, go to like 5. I think that's me. Okay, that's close enough. So I have one where I'm actually standing there with a stick and I'm pointing across so I can show you that I can touch. And the point, so let's talk about a little bit about the law, because one of the things that you need to find and make a recommendation to the council is whether or not the threshold requirement that all abutting landowners have said okay. And so what does abut mean? And so we heard that, traditionally we kind of didn't like to use the word a dot, even though technically that means abut. you know, there's a difference between, you know, this property here, and you can see that where that land is compared to mine, it's literally in our front yard. It's over to the side, but it's in our front yard. And this, you know, over here, 11801, that's a whole other lot away. So touching makes a big difference. And touching is the legal definition and is the word, and it means touching in Webster Dictionary, Black's Law Dictionary. But we also have the St. Helens Municipal Code, which is the development code, which says that the words listed below have specific meaning stated unless the context clearly indicates another meaning. So the legal petition was, we want to develop our property. That's their reason for this. And you in the code section say, they have to state their legal reason. And so the reason is development, and there is a development code, and the development code has definitions. And abutting means adjacent, adjoining, or contiguous, to physically touch or border upon, or to share a common property line. So our property meets all of those definitions. And not only that, our property, the spirit of what abutting means affects is for our property as well. Jenny, could you go back to number 2, please?
Exhibit 2.
Yeah, exhibit 2. 3 then. 4. 5. There we go. And there was a better one, but there's supposed to be a bike trail down there. There's supposed to be a lady walking her baby. There's supposed to be somebody walking their dog, and they're headed to the river. And there's light and air, and that's what's supposed to be. That's what we bought. They want to completely change the character of our front yard to include potentially a 30-foot high wall and a big building. That's completely changing our property rights and what it is that we bought. And so I think it's a big deal. It's not just about a point. This is stomping all over what we bought here and what was planned for here. And so we qualify as abutting property owners, not only legally qualify, absolutely qualify under the letter of the law, but we also qualify under the spirit of the law. And I'm going to say that we are going to use our legal rights to defeat this petition. And it begins with this planning, asking the planning department to planning commission to say to the city that not all of the abutting property owners have consented. And you should make that finding because the city is heading down the wrong road with this thing. And now I want to turn to some of the comments that Mr. Locke made, and then I'm going to finish. And that is, why hasn't this property been used like it's supposed to have been used? Why isn't it already a public trail? Why haven't we already built our scenic overlooks? Why isn't the public already using this property? I hear it's been in the plan for years. And I can tell you what I heard is that this thing, that Wayne Wygant had already paid for the improvements to make this public right away. I do not know if that's true, but I am going to be filing a public records request tomorrow. And I'm going to be requesting the hearings and the city council minutes on this. But my understanding was that this was a done deal and there was going to be a trail there, and it somehow didn't get built. Now, I want to find out about that. I want to look into that. But regardless, what I think the city should do is should reject this petition in its entirety. Number one, because it has to legally. At some point, I hope I don't have to enforce my rights by resorting to things other than coming to the government and recognizing them for what they are. But also, I think the most important thing is that this entire petition is not a negotiation. It is dead. The whole thing is dead because they came forward with it with a legal defect. But the whole thing, as you could see from Jenny and Jacob's reporting and what we've heard from the public here, is that this is not in the best interest of the public at all. So it should be denied entirely. Let me consider if I want to say anything else. I think I've said enough. So I would ask that the planning commission find, number one, that the requirement that all of the budding property owners have consented to the petition has not occurred, and therefore you would recommend that the council deny the petition. That you would also recommend that caution the council that should not be negotiating, because I believe that this is fatal. There is no ability, once not all abutting landowners comply, that's it, and there's no piecing it out. And I do want to say something what Jacob said, and that's true, that maybe somebody moved it 1 inch, then maybe it would not exactly legally touch, but that's not the case we have here. The legal description in the petition is that we do touch, and so that's just the law, and that's the way it is. But also the spirit of the law and changing the property like that right in front of our place. So that's not to say that we shouldn't try to help Mr. Locke and these property owners out as a city at some point in time in the future, but they need to come to us with their proposals and their drawings and their money, and they need to enable this project to go forward as far as all the public access. But when you start looking at all these public improvements, I'm not sure how they sort it out. My suggestion is they should just build their 8 units. I have more to say about just some of the way that this was approached to the public. That Mr. Locke, when he wrote to his neighbors, he said that he asked them for his help, and one of them was to clean up the property. And so I put this in my opposition, and I'm going to say it for the public record. This property has been an eyesore for a long time, and it's a shame what has occurred to that old house, that old beautiful house. And I put it in my packet that he had asked that the neighbors help him clean up his property, and allow for development. And I'm thinking, you left all these cars parked on your property that don't have registration tags, and they're on here, and they're in I took some pictures of it, and you have a battery sitting out in front of your property that's been sitting there for months, garbage in front of your property. You've been letting cars park there. When we were originally exploring the area, we looked at some of the houses in the area, and there was a giant trailer parked full of trash in front of Mr. Locke's house, and that trailer is still parked in the public right of way. And he comes to the public and he says, grant my petition, give me your priceless view property so that I can clean up my mess. I don't think that's in the public interest. And I'm sorry, I want to be polite. I respect Mr. Locke and the fact that he's come here and his what he's done for the city for all those years that, but that's not a reason that he gets public property, that's for sure. And he brought this up and he brought it forward, and I'm going to say it for the public record because there's no reason for this thing to be granted, none whatsoever, and it's legally fatally defective. Anything else, Robbie? Thank you.
Why don't we have Russ Lowe come on now?
That's what I was gonna say. Is he still awake?
Get Russ on now.
Yeah, there's a couple people on Zoom that would like to talk. I wanted to finish the room.
All right.
Yeah, just because that's what I sent everybody in the room. Yeah.
All right.
Is anybody else in the room?
Anybody else in the room?
Sorry, Russ, I already kind of.
You're in control.
Yeah, so.
My name is Brady Freeman. I want to touch on number one about public interest. Clearly, this is not in the public interest. We haven't had a single person that really supported this. And giving away, I think, what is going to be priceless viewpoint property is not in the public interest. I walk every single day along the waterfront and just about. And I think that the plans to have a park of some sort in that area is a good plan. I think we can do it, and I do not see that this is in the public interest. But it seems to me that your request to continue this is really a moot point. If Mr. Dosky is correct in that he abuts the property, it seems like he doesn't do it, and then it seems like you have another person that's rescinded their authorization. It seems to me that you don't meet the criteria of 100%, and then it doesn't go forward. But in general, I don't think that we should give free land. In addition, I wanted to talk just a little bit about your next topic about proactive. We don't have standards for building. They're at least very good standards. And I think that that is something that the planning commission needs to address, because you have an area, we're going to have development, and putting 16 units in that area should not be something that's part of our standard, regardless of whether he needs free property or not. You know, there should be standards about parking. You have 16 units, you need at least, I would hope, 16 parking spaces, maybe 32. If you figure 2 people per thing, where are you going to put 32 parking spaces? And those are kind of the standards that I think this committee needs to talk about and develop, to say that we want to have one development. There's going to be a lot of development that hopefully happens on our waterfront. And we need to consider those things, and there needs to be standards that we adhere to so that we do not have our waterfront destroyed and our scenic views destroyed. And to me, putting 16 units on that property is just not compatible and should not be something that's allowed, and is not part of a standard that should even be considered for our city, regardless of whether he needs property from the city or not. But certainly it's not in the public interest at all to give away property. And I would hope that at some point in time, you talk about trying to set standards and being proactive as a planning commission, so that this kind of a proposal shouldn't go forward. And if he wants to develop his property, you know, I think it's unfortunate that the property has been allowed to decline to the point where, and again, I'm not in that, I would hope that that house could be saved or remodeled. I think that's a better standard than 16 crowded units on a piece of property with no parking. So not to mention, you know, the moving of the utilities, and you know, the other concerns from the neighbors. Again, I would say, I would hope that you would make a decision tonight and say that this legally does not meet the criteria of 100% approval and deny it. Thank you.
Next.
My name is Scott Jacobson. I'll be brief. Jacob, Jenny, outstanding job. I'm opposed to it. Everybody else has said it. Public interest, I think the case is obvious for this. I also think that the applicant's advocate, the planner, has said that he's dealt with a few vacations in his time at Sandy, and I've seen, did a cursory view of the council meetings and all this, going back just to February. I was looking for something else, an ordinance about the city docks, and it seems like vacations in St. Helens seems to be kind of more of a common occurrence here. So I prefer, if that wasn't the case, I'd like to keep the public land public. And but I think it's public interest, and I think the case is obvious. That's all I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your service too.
Any more back there?
Patient.
Sure, yeah. I'm Les Waters. I've waited a long time, so I want to take a lot more of your time. But I wanted to read something and then if you have any questions. I own the properties at 130 and 170 Columbia Boulevard, which are one lot west of the subject vacation area. At some point, 130 Columbia Boulevard, which was the parsonage for the adjacent Congregational Church building, was separated from the full lot that abuts North First Street, so very close. I have owned the properties for about 30 years, and I wrote this before I heard subsequent testimony. Excuse me. Apparently, I am in the 27.5% of the affected property owners who did not consent to the petition, since I did not receive a formal document to approve or disapprove. I participated in a review of the proposed master corridor plan and strongly supported the concept of a designated overlook at that time. Excuse me, and continue to do so for the same reason. Unrestricted public access should be retained and protected. Consequently, I support the staff analysis, conclusion, and recommendation, but would like to add additional considerations. Traffic concerns. In the past 2 weeks, there was an accident that pushed over the street sign post and a mailbox on the northwest corner of First Street and Columbia Boulevard. Over the years, there have been a number of accidents at that corner, and without careful consideration of how traffic will be managed at the intersection, especially if new construction adds to the density and reduces the maneuverable space, then no vacation of public streets should be granted. Finally, I know this maybe is outside of the policy, but I have a concern about informed consent. And I think that question, should those who agree to the vacation petition be provided with a complete analysis in the staff report so that they are aware of the potential consequences of their approval? So that's my 45 minutes.
Okay,
Anyone else in the audience? So, okay.
all right, we can move to Zoom land. Carmen Dunn has had her hand up this entire time. So Carmen, if you're still there.
I am here. Do you want me to have video on or no?
Yeah, if you would like to, let me see.
Okay.
Not sure that I can.
It doesn't let me do video, but that's fine. I don't need to have it on.
We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. You don't need to see my face. Hi, I'm Carmen Dunn. I am a resident on Madrona Court in St. Helens, and I am a member of the Parks and Recreation Commission. So I just wanted to come and speak and let you guys know that I oppose the development, or I oppose the vacation. I think that the vacation with the purpose of development and or redevelopment of their properties really is just a financial interest of those property owners. I do not believe that this benefits the city or the citizens of St. Helens, and I do believe it would have a negative impact on the city and the citizens. If we were to vacate these properties, these pieces of property, I believe it does go against items that are spelled out in the Parks and Trails Master Plan that was adopted in July of 2015. There are 2 sections in there that talk about, well, there's a lot of sections in there that talk about trail routes, but there is one specific one, which is a trail route proposed for West Columbia Boulevard Extension, which is the small pedestrian connection from Columbia Boulevard to River Street. And that's the one that Jenny talked about. So I just think it's really important to remember that that connection is planned out. It is in the master plan. I also think the concept design at 30%, it shows kind of the pathway going to the left-hand side down to River Street. But I think it's important to consider that that is a 30% concept, as Jenny had stated earlier. And so if it came time to develop that, it could be, in theory, I would think, changed to be the other side. So I know that the staff recommendation was to allow partial vacation of the 100 of the South River Street portion, but I would definitely go against that because concepts are not complete. And if we give that piece of property away, it takes away the opportunity to change those plans in the future when it does get developed. I also think Jenny mentioned that there is room for a sidewalk down on River Street, but I think we also need to consider potential bicycle lanes and other widening of that area. And if we were to vacate that property, we could be limited in the future. A couple of other things, I just want to make sure connectivity across the city, not just in this vacation request, but in the future. I think it's really important for the planning commission to be thinking about that and thinking, I know that this is a really high profile one because it's directly in the plan, but I think it's important to consider in the future when vacations are reviewed. The other piece I wanted to note, the beginning of this talked about the percent consent of property owned or percent consent of those who owned property in that specific area. And I think it would be really interesting to see that percentage of only the properties that are not owned by the people who are requesting this vacation. So taking those counts out of the percentage to see what that percentage truly is, since there's multiple properties involved in the vacation request. And then another thing that I thought would be important to consider is the total square foot of the request. There's a lot of pieces of land being asked for here. And when you look at the map, it's a huge portion if you were to combine that. So I would be really interested to see what that total square footage is compared to the total square footage of the property in its current state. I feel like the city would be giving away a huge chunk of prime real estate that would just directly benefit the owners of that property. And as they mentioned, there would be 16 units they would be able to get there instead of 8. So that is essentially doubling the value of their property for them specifically. And then what was the other note that I made? I think that was it. I think a lot of this is stuff you already heard, but connectivity I think is really important. Viewpoints are really important. So I would recommend that you completely oppose all pieces of the vacation and not allow any sections to go through. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Russ, are you ready?
Hey, good morning. So we have an abutting property to the petition, which is 131 River Street. My wife and I had originally signed the consent form in March, and we didn't have complete information at the time. After learning more about it, it is our belief that it is not in the public interest, and it may negatively impact property values in the area as well. And if we could rescind our consent at this time, we would do so. I'm not sure what recourse we have to do that, but I want to be on record saying we would now rescind our consent if we were able to. And that's all I've got.
Okay, thanks, Russ.
Thanks. All right, hearing no further discussion.
Yeah, it's given our customary procedures, it's fair to give the applicant an opportunity to decide.
Right.
So choose, of course. Not an obligation to do that.
I just cover a couple of little details. Not sure who said it regarding the percentage required affected property owners at 60%. So they have to do the math to figure out if those two folks that rescinded.
They're both small, and you're at 72.5 now. So I don't think it would put you under.
Russ wasn't even included. You
Russ-
threw him out because of the
No, I have it.
dual part
It's
ownership
Russell and his wife signed.
on the
Yeah, I just
You
checked.
accepted on the condo, but not the property.
That's right. So
Yes.
you're referring to this common area surrounding the condo, that I did not count because you were missing a signature. But for Russ Lowe and his wife's property, that one it did count.
And I guess regarding the abutting property question, we adamantly disagree with Mr. Tashi regarding his interpretation. I think between us, we have over 30 years experience. I guess the reason I said I only have done a couple of annex or vacations is because in the city of Sandy, those are typically done by the public works director. So I wasn't involved in them. There were more vacations than that in the city of Sandy. Although frankly, the city of Sandy doesn't have these massive wide right of ways such as there are in the city of St. Helens, but I really think that, and as a bottom line, it could be conditioned to pull it 1 inch away from Mr. Tashi's property, and that thus that argument completely goes away. So other than that, we understand there's concern. I think people are there's legitimate concerns. The trail itself, it was always our impression that there would be a better replacement by the overlook that the applicants would be constructing for the public to enjoy. So if public doesn't want that improvement, then I guess this is a way of kind of turning that down in a sense. What is the public benefit? Nobody said there was of the $1 million+ of urban renewal funds that would be coming into the urban renewal district. So everybody's thinking of it. Yeah, it's only going to benefit the property owner, but in reality, the urban renewal district in which this property sits will have an incredible increase of value. And that increment will go directly to the urban renewal district to do improvements within the district. And so that's a big thing. In the city of Sandy, we redid our entire downtown using urban renewal. So much that can be done using those funds. And this is how it happens with development occurring and that increment between the $5,000 he's paying in taxes now and that increase in value, that increment is then collected by the district. So there is a overall public benefit of that if you kind of look at it that way. Just with that, I don't know.
So the other public improvement is if the development puts in, totally redoes Columbia Boulevard, it puts in the stairway, then there's $150,000 the city doesn't have to buy. And when is the city gonna buy that? When's it gonna be put in? I put in the trail that is there now. Didn't exist until I put it in. Until then, the trail ran, like say, beside my house. I put that one in shortly after I moved there 40 years ago, so that a few friends could use it. Since then, it got more use. Got tired of the people walking next to my house. So I refurbished it. I spent about $2,000 and risked my life to refurbish the trail that's there now. I just spent about 3 weeks ago, the winter rains had washed a whole big section of it out, so I spent several hours redoing the trail, so it would be safe for everybody. If the development doesn't build a trail, who's going to build the trail and when will it be built is the question. So there is a benefit to it. The view, the development's going to take a little slice of the view, and we have development codes for the view. You can do like 20%. It's not going to take anywhere near 20% of the view that goes there all now. The land all this land, it doesn't change the view because it's all trees in my house right now. You can't see any more than you could as if the development's there. It's a wash. And right now, those roads have not been used for 130 years. Will they ever go anywhere? as far as the bicycle path, I can answer that bicycle path right now because I killed it. When Wayne Wygant came to the city council and wanted to put the bike path in here, I killed it because it's a liability for the city. That hill is way too steep for any bicycle path. The BMXers and the skateboarders will love it to death. And you'll find somebody in the hospital every week because it's going to be a steep, narrow trail. They talked about people walking down the trail. Why would you walk down that trail when there's a safe walking trail 200 feet over here? Why would you risk your life going down a bicycle trail with skateboarders and bicycles? It doesn't make any sense. And like I say, why would the city take on, it's almost a 50-foot drop between Columbia Boulevard and that pump house down there. That's a steep hill. Steep hill. I mean, bicycles shouldn't be going down, in the middle of town, shouldn't be going down steep hills like that. And, in the case for bicycles, one, you can carry a bike down a stairway if you want to. The other part is, it's like 3 blocks to go around on a bicycle. Is a bicycle trail actually needed there? The bicycle trail, if it is built, should be on the other side of the canyon against Wyatt Street. Canyon that abuts against Wyatt Street. I don't know if any of you, Audrey remembers, because one of our recommendations for the Riverfront Committee was to make another road that exited out the north end of the marina along Wyatt Street. And nobody seems to talk about that road anymore, and that was critical because it was a second exit for the marina. There's no way the only way you can build an exit on First Street is to build an overpass there. You're gonna put in a multi-million-dollar overpass for a few cars here and there when there's better ways around. I don't think so. Like I say, I served on city council. I know how many things in this town that are needed, way, way more than those 2 trails. I mean, they have to be here. Those 2 trails, as far as priorities, unless somebody's really pushing something, it's not gonna happen. You haven't got the money. You're 10 officers short right now on the police force. You need a new police building. There's $20 million. I could go down the list of gazillion dollars that you're gonna have to be building here before you're building a trail down the hill. And I'm sitting here offering to build you one free and give you millions of dollars in tax revenue. That's the benefit to the public.
Right. And keep in mind that we would, any development would have parking. The preliminary design would have at least 2 parking spaces per unit or more. So
which is code already.
We're considering that sort of stuff. We just haven't gotten to the detailed perspective yet. But,
Well, that's in our design.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you for
All right, thank you. We really appreciate your time.
All right. So
First key question is, do you want to continue this?
Are you gonna read Brendan Sundin's letter to the record? He requested that it would be read into the record during the hearing. I'm just wondering if we're gonna do that.
I think Jacob responded to,
Yeah, we let him know. I mean, if you want, yeah, that's fine. We typically, give you a copy, but if that's the request,
I just
certainly.
see that he said he'd like it read into the record if possible, so I think.
Okay, I can't impersonate his voice, so I don't do it justice, but okay, so here's what it says. This is from Brandon Sundin. First, I would like to thank the members of the Planning Commission for their time and service. I'm unable to attend in person this evening, but would like to voice my opposition to the vacation of the public right-of-way near the corner of Columbia Boulevard and North First Street. I appreciate the information provided in the staff report prepared by the City Planning Department. Several of my reasons are mentioned in the report. As a member of the St. Helens Parks and Recreation Commission, I am concerned that this vacation will affect the pedestrian connection between Columbia Boulevard and River Street, a connection that was identified in the 2015 Parks and Trails Master Plan as a quote-unquote high priority trail project. Beyond accessibility, the proposed development will likely affect one of the most beautiful viewpoints in the city with clear views of the river, marina, and Sand Island. I am concerned that this street vacation will give the green light to the demolition of one of the most historic homes in St. Helens, the two-story Queen Anne style residence that was built by Dr. Edwin Ross in 1895 and was once known as Tanglewood on the Columbia. This property once was one of the most beautiful and well manicured in the city, is also part of the St. Helens Historic District, and in my opinion, should be preserved at all costs to maintain the charm and feel of the downtown area. I see no benefit to the citizens of St. Helens to vacate this public right-of-way. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Okay, to the issue of keeping this open. We got any views on that?
I think we move forward and make a decision this evening.
Okay.
Well, he has the right to leave it open, doesn't he?
This is not a public hearing,
Oh, okay.
so it's your prerogative.
Yeah, well, I think you got a ton of information, and I guess having been through this process before, it's sort of back to the drawing board, approach it again. Got enough information from you guys, so I would do the recommendation tonight.
Yeah, just one thing clarified. I know we had a hearing about the city possibly being an applicant and that we're a budding property owner.
Affected.
You're affected, okay.
Yeah, so
I need clarification.
So the city property in question, it's partially, part of the property is within the affected area. So this is the city property here. And this is the one where there was a request for the city to sign as a property owner, but the city council did not. So it's as far as area, it's not that valuable. If it was the whole property, yeah, it'd be a pretty good signature, but it's just a portion of that, so.
I just needed that clarification, so thank you. Since this isn't a hearing, the one thing that sticks with me is that with no notice, we have this kind of opposition to this application, right? So that's big issue for me, and that two of the people, the property owners that previously said yes, now that they know the whole story, are saying no. He is a very well-respected man in this community, and I think I just have to think that as we went around and got signatures, they didn't, maybe get the whole story. So I think it'd be really interesting in the future if people either got the packet or they had to attend a meeting or something, so they know the whole story. So I find it the budding definition really interesting. I tend to agree that in fact the Toshkis are abutting property owners. But I just think the opposition to it is really a shout out to what the city council is going to see when they actually have a hearing.
I'm being funny too.
Major consensus.
I think Jennifer put it beautifully.
Right. Well, we have the recommendation of staff, and they're denying everything, but the one grant they did say was the piece west River Street.
With potentially a bite taken out of it.
And then you took a piece out of that, yeah. But you look at the hillside there and it's straight down, and it's like that. I don't know why that person would even want that parcel there to be.
Because of the cliff top of it, which is her backyard, belongs to the city.
That's here nor there.
Right, but I mean.
Okay, so going ahead with recommendation 3.
Well,
We need a quorum.
you do have a quorum because you have a majority. We barely have a quorum. But we do. And so,
Motion.
All right,
I'm gonna move that we deny the application in its entirety.
I'll second.
second. And all in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none. For the public coming out.
well, we can put our planning commission back. You want to take 5 to?
Just, yeah.
Oh, it just.
So everybody in Zoom land, we're taking 5 minutes so people can refresh themselves.
I'm gonna go ahead and mute the room. Yeah, we're online.
All right.
I had to refill more in the cup because I know loosen up, it was a little windy.
Okay. All right, we're all here. Back. Okay, item proactive planning commission framework discussion.
Okay, so I think we're really close. I hope we're close.
Close to what?
We're close to being simple, to sing, easy to follow. Remember those big words we did? I put them in light gray this time, but I put a smiley face on it because it's towards the end.
And it was dimmer, but bigger.
Yeah.
This is normally my kickoff, and so I've reviewed, staff's, I'll say improvements to the submission that I had made following the last hearing, and so I think you gotta scroll up, we're lower, right? That's still a draft, right?
That's correct. Yeah, this is a draft based on last discussion. We tweaked just a little bit of stuff. We put it in a more final looking format, but yeah, this is still a draft.
But I think scroll up, down a little. I believe that. So do you believe that, is this what staff is proposing to do the final version here? Or is it the red line? Because I thought the red line was the.
Okay, so what I did is I put the original version, the original third revision from you, Steve. And then I redlined that to reflect the changes on this final document, because I wanted the formatting to be more presentable, with a little bit more spacing. You know, with people that have to read code books all the time, you know, we're used to not spacing, but we want this to be user friendly, and so, you know, some spaces are good in there. So the content on this document here is basically the same as the red line.
This one, yeah.
I just wanted to convey the changes, and that was why we had this one there.
Well, I think this, what do we want to call this? The final version drafted by staff with the letterhead? How do we want to identify it for the record?
Well, I would say this is the first draft of the final version.
First draft of the final version?
Yeah.
Okay. I think it looks good, and I think we've kicked it around a lot. I don't have anything to add to it, and I'm prepared to make a motion unless anybody else wants to talk about it. I'm gonna move that we adopt it. That's what I'm gonna.
I'll second it.
Okay. So I move that we adopt the version that has the St. Helens letterhead as described by Jacob as the planning commission proactive procedures. Another second on that.
Second.
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 It's been moved and seconded, all in favor?
Right.
Opposed?
And then Russ Lowe says aye. And then I would like to say something, even though I talked a lot at this hearing. I know Dan isn't here, but I'm gonna thank him at the next I think this is a historic event for the city of St. Helens. I'm hoping that our commission will be able to be helpful to the city and its additional responsibilities, additional role that we take on. And I'm hoping that these procedures will help us in that endeavor. I want to thank the council of our more senior planning commission members, the assembly, who advised to go baby steps, and Audrey, who provided a lot of guidance in this, and then the members of the proactive subcommittee. But I really want to shout out to and thank mostly Dan Carey, our chairman of our chairperson of our commission. Dan got this thrust upon him without any prior notice. I think Dan was concerned about the additional time and also other concerns that he had about this move. And I believe that these proactive procedures are fair, and I think they allow for a fair consideration of the items. And I think his feedback and his leadership are key in bringing about these procedures. And I particularly want to thank you for that on the record, on the public record at this time. And I will say it again when he returns, hopefully in our next meeting.
Would you like Dan, I know he's not here for the vote, but would you like him to still sign it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll wait till next meeting and then have him sign it then, or you can sign it whenever you think is appropriate.
Okay, perfect. And then I'll either bring the final executed version next meeting or just send it out, but. Oh, yeah, so I just wanted to have a quick conversation on this. So there's been a few more emails being sent to the commission as a whole, and that's okay. But just as a reminder, and I can't remember what jurisdiction it was, it's been several years, but there was a jurisdiction that got in hot water because of email exchanges. And those emails were being exchanged outside of a public meeting. It was determined to be a quorum, meeting outside of a meeting. And so, sending an email to everybody, that provides information. The thing you want to avoid is start replying, because that's where you can start getting into that, are they a quorum now? So just because there's been an uptick in emails, I just wanted to, some of you, we've talked about this sometime in the last several years, but with some new members and just a refresher course, there's enough craziness in St. Helens. We don't want to add to the turmoil, so.
I appreciate the clarification because I wasn't sure, so I didn't even open the emails that I
Okay.
recently because I wasn't sure.
Yeah, you can read it.
Well, I knew I could read it, but I didn't know.
So I'm like, I'm not opening
Yeah,
that.
there was one I wanted to respond to, but I didn't.
Okay, well, good. That's
Dina.
Yeah. I asked you, break-wise, when can we bring up charging for these vacations?
well, so the council, it's over the last several years, the council's kind of talked about it. But in the ultimate decision, they didn't go through with it. Now, if you recall, on the big old list of stuff, and on this, in the strategic plan or beyond 2 years, one of the things I had on there was street vacation policy.
Right.
And that would be, we have just a little bit in the code and state law, and it would be good to capture. I mean, I think I've done like 25 of them or something, a whole lot, and I've learned a lot from that. And there's been a lot of really good input. Some of the questions of, should it be charged or not? It's come up. I have notes asking our legal accounts about it years ago. But I think that's, one of those things. But I think it's a matter of, when do you start doing that? And absent written guidelines, I think that would be part of a recommendation to the council in a vacation if you
Well, I think
approved
we
it.
need to look at it, particularly when he hands us something like this and wants 25 feet of land all the way around him. And then he shows us literally that he's gonna use all of the 10 feet to build on.
Yeah, and you know, this hasn't been vetted.
I know that,
So
but
it's,
I'm just saying.
You're talking about charging for the land?
Yeah.
Appraised
the
value.
vacated- Yeah,
Yeah.
upgrade.
Common for like ODOT.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at this,
That come today.
the Keith handed up.
That was one of our.
I mean, that was,
I didn't see that.
I was already tipping to no. And that just blew me out of the water. Just really thinking about, even when they're gonna build on it like this.
It is. Makes sense to revisit it.
I mean, what are we giving him?
You know, we charge $700 or so bucks and
That covers
Oh, yeah. I mean,
basically
that's
our
living
bare
room and
minimum
everything.
time.
I
$700
think county's $1,000.
for a street vacation.
I don't know.
We have to notify the Chronicle though and referral emails.
Too late, bud. $10,000 a square foot.
Yeah, why not?
so that the emails and quorums, I just wanted to put it on the remember to at least mention it. So that was a quick one.
Okay.
All right. Permits. Down to the planning activity report, May.
Yeah, there's something I want to talk about in here. It's been a something that's been a little disturbing. And I'm at the point, you know what, I'm just gonna tell you, when it happens, I'm gonna let you know about it. Because I'm kind of fed up with it. So it's the ACSP development, and there's an attachment I would like to bring up.
I just go to the listing.
Yeah, just go to the listing. So
Well, they reduced the price.
yeah, they did.
1.5 million.
So first of all, in department report, you'll see a letter to OLCC because we had to deny a permit. Basically, due to lack of cooperation. And I just want you to understand some things. First of all, so they contacted John Walsh, city administrator. He is my supervisor. And this is from one of the people representing the company, Eric, who was the OLCC inspector. Let me back up. So we provide land use compatibility statements for these marijuana licenses for production, processing, et cetera. And I find out that those can be rescinded. So I've been in communication with OLCC, just, you know, when we're having these issues, and so they contacted them. So Eric is the OLCC inspector. So Eric told Pete is one of the people involved in the company today, that all Eric needs is an email from you, and it's just to John Walsh saying to disregard the letter that Jacob sent. Think about that. Now, look at this. I want to show you some things. Because this goes to a whole level of what's going on here. So first of all, this photo, now this is a minor thing. This is not what the site looks like. Yeah, that's a big deal. That's not a big deal. Remaining site acreage is 100% buildable and approved for expansion. That's despite the fact that it's considerably encumbered with a landfill. We have a denied land use approval, and there's no approval for a bunch of buildings. So what does that mean? Let's go down a little bit.
He's helped sell that property, he could put his condos in.
Yeah.
Did I go too far?
Yeah, he got.
I want to hear.
Go up. Sorry, I went too far.
No, go this way.
Okay. Keep going.
So there's some misleading things on here that really disturb me in this sale. Yeah, this would have been the advantage of the PDF. Okay, city put in a brand new RO system a few years ago.
I don't know what that means, but that's a question for us.
Reverse osmosis.
Yeah, reverse osmosis. So yeah, I'm not aware
City water.
of city doing that. It doesn't even have a direct city water connection. It goes through the mill. But probably one of the most disturbing parts is the active processing license.
Is that down?
Yeah.
Oh, that was with the other licenses.
Oh, maybe it's up. Oh, isn't it bulleted?
Go this way. Okay, here it is. So what happened last week? Building number 4. Building number 4 is the one with processing occurring in it. They did get land use approval. They did submit their building permits. Last week, they withdrew their building permits saying, we're not going to pursue this, and included a picture of the inside of the building where the processing stuff was removed. Active processing license. The processing facility is nearly completed and construction processing has already started with 2 product lines and a good sales history. They withdrew that. It's not occurring. That's a lie.
Oregon Board of Realtors need to talk to these people.
So LoopNet is a place where commercial brokers list their properties for sale. This is really a commercial broker that ends up doing their job.
Or is doing their job
Yeah.
by lying.
Right.
Well, can I say a few things?
Sure.
And ask a few things. So I did make a public records request. So I talked to Councilor Topaz. And Councilor Topaz believes that there's actually a court ruling that has reversed the sale of the property in the first place. So I did make a public records request because I don't know the case number. I don't know anything. I have any way to look it up. I made a public records request this week for the pleadings the city has in its possession. But if it's true that a court has ordered that the original sale to this business was no good, it means the city owns the property. Borough doesn't own anything. So I do think we need to figure out, Councilor Topaz has been asking this in his meetings as well. So I do think that, and Councilor Chilton also in the last meeting that I attended was expressing concern about this business. And so I didn't mind bringing this up saying, I think we need to know what is the legal status of the property transfer. First of all, who owns the property by law now? If we own the property, then we need to figure out, okay, we own this property. What are we going to do with it? And where does the legal case stand? I don't know if you guys know the answer to that or not at this point.
It's been an issue of executive session and we haven't.
We're not privy to those.
I've heard that stuff secondhand, but not firsthand. So
So I will state for the record that I made a public records request for the pleadings, and I intend, and I think that let's just say this. I think that there are some real problems with this business. So not only do we have this potential issue with ownership, additionally, we have a business that has operated without a permit, has erected buildings without a permit, has dug in the soils of abutting soils without a permit that violated environmental regulations, and is now attempting to sell itself by misrepresenting itself on this. And so I feel that we should definitely as a planning commission consider, and this is for discussion, investigating what the heck is going on with this thing, including one, what is the actual legal status of this business? Where is the litigation going? What is the city's stance on this litigation? Because honestly, the sale of this property is something that I understand is very unpopular. And so, and may not have been done according to law, according to a judge. I don't know if that's true or not. But if it was not done according to law and it is not a valid transfer, that means the city owns the property. And so now, and then we also have a business that may actually be squatting, frankly, on our property. I don't know, there's a continuing legal action. And they are basically ignoring all of our regulations. And so I think, you know, when we talk about enforcement, so does this business not have a valid permit?
They have a valid permit for buildings 1 through 3 where the production is at.
So I thought you had denied a permit.
I did. It was for all these little sheds.
And 80 square foot buildings.
Yeah, and that was what those were to get so they were trying to vest their OLCC licensing. And the license says you have to have a tax on it, you have to have a building and camera, so these kind of things. And early on, you know, the building department said they didn't need a permit. And I told them, I have correspondence back from January of 2021 saying, you need land use permit. And they kept dodging and dodging. And it's been like this since the beginning. And that's why I'm fed up. I'm tired of wasting my time on this.
So where exactly are they in this? I'm sorry, Jacob, but I'm trying to make sure I understand exactly procedurally what the issue is. So this business is lacking a permit to do what? What exactly?
And it's basically the entitlements to place those sheds. It's not even a major permit.
But isn't this is something that came up, I don't know, earlier this year and they were supposed to do some kind of application process?
Yeah, so they started working on it and then I didn't hear from anything. It was busy. I had held on to it way longer than I would have because we don't want to see it fail. You know, normally when we issued a complete letter, they have 30 days to provide the revised materials. And I waited over a year. There was a little bit of dialogue and then nothing. And at that point, I'm like, why am I sticking my neck out for this? So I just denied it. They stopped communicating. So I'm finally like, I have no choice. That's when I contacted OLCC, because when they put the sheds in, you know, I was talking to the OLCC inspector saying, look, these aren't permitted. And he said, well, it wasn't his issue. He just looks at compliance for that. But I could still contact OLCC about the issue. And that was the letter I sent and referred to in this email about basically them asking John to override my correspondence.
And have you heard from John how he responds to that?
Oh yeah, we've been talking about it. Yeah, so I sent John the material. He actually forwarded that to them today. So hopefully they can understand what's going on. And, you know, it may result in a phone conversation and perhaps some initiative on their part. But the other recent thing was them withdrawing their building permit for that processing and then seeing on the LoopNet where it blatantly mentions having active processing already. That was one of the bigger, like, whoa, I can't believe that's even on an ad.
Well, that's definitely misleading and if it were the Realtors Board would want to see that. So, I mean, that's a whole other avenue that these guys are lying.
So what about the digging? I want to return to that trench and then where that was another issue that came up earlier. And can you please remind us, if you would, what is this trench and how has this trench violated the city's laws and in your opinion, and have they remedied it?
So that trench, what you're looking at is what's called the South 80 landfill. So that's an old landfill site that the mill used. And when the city was helping establish the business in some of the existing buildings, you can see 2 larger buildings to the right there in that photo. So those were refitted for marijuana production. And we knew it was on the landfill. We contacted DEQ to understand their concerns, and then concerned about inhabited building, gases seeping in and causing problems. And so there was a bunch of monitoring and stuff. And we know DEQ was concerned about that. I haven't had a conversation with DEQ lately, but we know they have concerns. And in this case, you can see the electric conduit, they just dug into that. And I don't know what kind of concerns DEQ has on that. But I know they were concerned about those existing buildings. I'm assuming they would be concerned about that. And because of the knowledge that we have on the history, you know, one of the things I put in my correspondence is please provide any evidence that you've talked to DEQ so we understand, you know, what they've done to make sure, you know, they're in the good graces with them. I don't think they have. So I'm not as knowledgeable about the specific laws about digging into that, other than I know DEQ was concerned with the initial buildings.
Didn't they like penetrate a protective layer or something over the landfill? I thought that there was something that.
It is capped, so yeah.
Digging into the cap and.
And I don't have a lot of, I've been through a lot of street vacations, but not a lot of landfills, so.
Was that city property, the trench that, or is that their?
This is on the landfill that was partitioned off.
On their property.
And there could be pending litigation about the partition being valid or invalid. That's what you were bringing up earlier.
Yeah, if Jenny, the old map for the South 80 landfill, okay, so the South 80 landfill there, now their property is not entirely that landfill, but it's basically the entire landfill, and then some area to the north of it. This is south up here. So their main buildings are here. Two of those buildings that I kind of showed you to the right of the photo are roughly in here, and then those little sheds are scattered around there.
So the issue with the sheds is you denied so without a permit, what should be happening to those sheds? Should they be gone?
Yeah, technically they're not permitted, and so then it's, you know, what enforcement strategy do you take?
How about $1,000 a day till they get them off?
There is that. You know, I have to work efficiently, right? And so the first thing is, okay, well, we have this OLCC issue. Let's see if OLCC will put heat on them and see if we can get compliance with that route. You know, there is the citation, bringing them to court and doing all that stuff. But that stuff can take a lot of time. So I tend to be choosy then. And as you saw, it was for sale. And sometimes when a property is for sale, we will get a request for information about the property. And it's very common for one of those questions to be, is there an existing enforcement case? And so a denial puts you into a tactical situation where you can say, yes, there is an enforcement case, and then that, you know, can create heat to gain compliance indirectly as well.
What do you want us to do?
I just want you to be aware of it. I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm at a point where.
Yeah, but the thing is Councilor Topaz has raised some concerns, and then Councilor Chilton has raised some concerns. In fact, as I recall, Councilor Chilton had asked you, you know, where were we going with this? And I think it was another issue regarding this business, and you had said the same thing. You know, we're trying to get them to comply. We're trying to, and I think Councilor Chilton was saying something about. Why don't we ask them to come before us and ask them why they haven't done that? Let's issue a request for this business to come and explain to us why they haven't got their permits together on the shed, and see if they're going to come and talk to us. And also I want an explanation concerning what they've done to remedy their digging potentially. I don't know. Do you think we should do that? Or should we just ask them to come to us and ask and explain why they haven't been able to get their permitting about the shed? And then why don't we ask them about this, why don't we ask them about their advertisement too? Why don't we resolve that we're gonna have the owners of Orotech or whoever it is come to us and explain to us why it is that they can't seem to get their paperwork together on their permitting for the sheds and what we should, and what do they think we should do about it? Whether we should make stronger regulations as a planning commission, maybe we should be making our regulations stronger so that Jacob isn't put in such a position where, you know, maybe after 2 warnings, it's a $500 a day, something like that.
Yeah, I think because some of the dialogue with John, John, they communicate with John, and then I provide John that information, he forwards it to them, some of that just happened today. I think we'll see what happens with this. If they continue to resist, because it just always seems like there's backpedaling. Maybe they'll finally be like, oh, okay, yeah, we'll try to comply.
A lot of litigation you're not privy to, so.
And I think if Counselor Berkeley was here, he might have insight and be able to relay this concerns to council overall too, so.
Yeah, I think it's,
waiting for him.
yeah, it's probably a little premature to resolve to do something specifically on this. But at this point, I want to keep you informed. I just think that's a
good idea. And I do think that we need to, first of all, this business violates the federal law. And, I know that there's state laws that are, make it legal, but it violates the federal law. And the federal government, if they wanted to seize this business, the US attorney could come out here and seize that business tomorrow if they wanted to. And so I think a business that violates the federal law, really, I'm concerned about that they would then not be complying with our local laws. And I just am trying, when I hear somebody as reasonable as you, Jacob, being frustrated by their inability to I don't understand, and then you're frustrated and you've issued a letter and they try and go behind your back, and then we see something like that. I think the council is waiting for somebody to take action. I don't know, maybe we should take action. We should, Jacob, he says, but then it's out of his hands, it's our hands. I don't know, what do you guys think? We should have him come in and talk to us a little bit.
Well, but in Topaz, as you've mentioned that he's got information I haven't heard.
He just had a docket that he showed me, and he said there was a court order last November that he believed voided the sale. Now, I asked him to send me legal documents. So I did make the public records request. So.
Does that take time usually, or?
Well, I just asked them for the pleadings they had in their possession, and Lisa Scholl wrote to me saying that she was gonna send me a projection of how much it would cost to get the copies. So that's the next step, and get the copies soon.
Good word on that, and the frustration I see that you're having with this for years is not healthy. So.
What?
I want to break the first. Okay, so I guess, okay, any other thoughts? I'd like to bring him in here and have him and ask him a few questions, but that's me.
No, go for it.
Go for it, okay?
Yeah.
Well, let's see, I want to see what Sheila.
Well, we've got questions.
Yeah, I want to see why they can't get their paperwork together with and why they went behind his back. I don't know. I don't want to damage the relationship, but at the same time, I feel like this keeps coming up. Councilor Chilton has asked. Jacob has said, I'm being patient. And to me, it's a pretty simple thing to get your permit together and get your paperwork together. And to me, and then we see this kind of an ad going on, and I don't know. I just feel like, to me, when we hear from our planning department that our regulations are being flouted. Maybe they should come here and explain, are they not clear? Maybe we should be trying, maybe they should be stricter, I don't know, I think we should kind of ask them about it and say, should we have fines attached to them? Are there fines attached to these regulations?
Yeah.
There are, okay.
I thought you knew about it. You said $1,000 a day.
Was it $1,000 a day?
I think so, yeah.
There you go. Seemed like a reasonable price to me. Especially a marijuana grow, they can easily afford it.
What,
Are they current with their taxes?
I don't know.
Yeah,
They
that's
don't
all.
waive their taxes.
Who are these, what is the name of the business?
Well, there's Orgrotech. That's the name they are under OLCC. But then there's the ACSP, which is just an acronym for the first name of the people, Alex, Sean, Pete, and I don't know who the C is.
There's a bunch of LLCs that are in.
And Alex lives in Oregon. I think the other ones are in California.
Sounds like a scam. Tell them, okay, I'm gonna move that that the planning department issue a request to the Orgrotech from the planning commission that they would come to our next meeting and explain to the planning commission if they have trouble understanding what our regulations are and how we could potentially improve upon them. And so we can make sure that our regulations are understandable.
So motion's been made.
I'll second it.
Get the motion. All in favor?
Vote for it.
Aye.
Aye.
All right, that's unanimous. So so the resolution is that we're gonna send invitation to Orgrotech that they're gonna come to the next planning commission meeting. And Jacob, if you could please outline in that letter the particular regulations that they are having trouble complying with, and I'd like to hear from them. The motion is that we'd like to hear from them, what is it about these regulations that they're having a hard time with? And we're gonna kind of look at them and get their feedback on them.
What's the consequence if they don't appear?
Well, you know what, I think they're gonna, let's just see what happens on the next page of the chapter, shall we? Let's just keep that as a mystery and then we'll cross our bridges when they come to them.
In the commission, they came before us, when they first started.
Yeah, but that was right at the beginning.
Yeah, and they wanted to be good community members.
Yes, yes.
And they're not.
Well, I don't know if they're not or not. I mean, I just, what I hear is there are sheds there, they need permitting. This is something that continues to come up. They haven't done what they want to do. Councilor Chilton has expressed concerns. Councilor Topaz has expressed concerns about this business. It's now come up in the planning report, and Jacob wants to continue to be patient. And Jacob, you could tell them that you wanted to continue to be patient, but we decided that we wanted to hear from them.
Yeah, the question will be timing. We do have a subdivision next month. And so for example, you could assume that they will be there at 7. But then if they're a no-show, so then let's say we schedule the first hearing for, I don't know, 7:15. That's probably what we should do instead of like 7:30 in case they're a no-show, then we're not wasting too much time.
Whenever you think.
Kind of thinking of.
It could be on the, Dan isn't here, but whenever you think it'd be best to have them on the agenda. I think it'd be a fairly brief item, but maybe not.
Yeah.
They can go before the subdivision or after us.
The subdivision could be long and so you don't know. So I'll try to do 7:15.
Be nice to see them. Be good to see them and talk to them.
You want hors d'oeuvres and, you want hors d'oeuvres?
Hors d'oeuvres?
Yeah. Be nice to talk to them.
Pretty nice. I mean, they, I don't know, they're having trouble. We kind of wanted to see what's going on.
YOS.
Anything else?
Only need one of the top assets.
Well, I don't know. Maybe there's something unclear about the rules or something that we need to think about. I mean, these are land use regulations and they seem to be having a hard time. Let's see what they have to say.
But other than that, I didn't have anything else to report. make sure that,
That's it. Jennifer,
I don't have anything.
nothing.
I'm quiet.
I have one thing. I won't make it too long. It's a question, I was reviewing the August 15, 2018 city council approving the container homes. And I just was thinking that it said what, $100,000 a piece. I realized it years ago.
Is that on 7th Street?
On 7th Street, yes, the one you just finished. Yes, okay. It's gonna be a public-private partnership. The city will retain ownership of the land and collect the lease fee rate. Developer will build a parking lot. The land is valued at $200,000. They propose a 50-year lease with 2 more 50s on top of that. Condominium association will be established, and the city can decide to sell or collect rent over the time of the development. The agreement does include credits for permit fees. The developer will pay only $40,000 for the whole project. So city council listened to all this. And, Al Peterson got up and he was commenting on the value and how can you have condominium ownership over leased property, and response to all this. The relationship between 7th Street container lofts and the tenants, condominium owners, there's provisions under the recitals. Waiving the development fees. And then the big one was affordable housing. So they said that the prices are going to be about $110,000. And recommends a low-income matrix to be incorporated into the lease agreement. So then they got Sean Ataki and Robert Vanetta. So today it's on the market. Each unit is $280,000. Now, at that, for affordability, who comes up with 20% down on that? If you need affordable housing, that's going to be a stretch to come up with 20%.
Do you see anything cheaper in St. Helens? It's kind of the cheapest thing. There hasn't been anything under 3.
Okay.
I would say.
And there are 3%, 5% loans that people can get.
I'm not trying to argue with you. They're definitely not 100,000,
I'm
but
just adding
it's
this
still the
up.
cheapest unit.
Well, talk about no disclosure on the listings, that listing agents.
Well, there's no, I mean, do they own the property or
Say that
not?
you don't own.
And then your mortgage insurance is $100. Property taxes, they put down there, property taxes. Are you leasing it or are you paying property taxes? What's that all about? $231. Your house insurance is $100. Your HOA fees, he's gonna charge $300 a month, so.
Oh, that is high.
And so $2,093 pulls that up. And that doesn't include your utilities. So is the city gonna charge them beyond the property taxes for a lease agreement? I mean, anybody going into this, I don't care if it's a lower price than the other things, and you're only talking 580 square feet, $500 a square foot. But I think the city got sold a bill of goods, because since we're public-private partnership, I think we got the shaft on that.
Well, so is your concern that if they are selling for 280,000, the city's not gonna get a bigger cut?
No, that they're overpriced.
Well,
They're overpriced.
That's the market.
But if they're gonna sell, they're gonna sell quick.
You think so?
Oh, yeah.
That's great.
There's nothing.
That's great. Where did the city get out of it as a public-private?
Yeah, I have no idea. We just approved the, we approved the plan
I
and.
agree, the city should reap the benefit from the market too.
Yeah.
I know we have 5 public parking spaces. I can tell you that much.
And they're.
Do they have a meter on it?
We sold the one, right? Or is it still?
Want to ask for an
We
accounting?
could use parking, Kenny.
Yeah, I think we should ask for, to clarify that, City out
Why don't
of,
we ask for an accounting when the property sold, let's see the accounting for how much the city got out of it.
after it's all sold, 8 units or?
Are they renting it?
No.
Is it leased or is it?
No, the land is.
Yeah, it's a condo, they're condos, yeah.
But the land is leased, right?
I know, so I guess clarification we'd like from the city is what's the status with the land when you're buying these as a condominium? And he's charging homeowners fees.
How long was the lease?
150 years.
Okay, so that's like having a cabin in the mountain
Yeah.
national forest.
What do you
Well,
wanna know?
seriously,
When you buy a condo, you own from the sheetrock in, if they have sheetrock.
yeah.
So it's not
What,
developer, whoever.
what's the outcome of the city on this public-private partnership?
We get money from the lease, is what it sounds like.
What lease?
There's a lease
The land
agreement
lease.
for the land.
That might
When
be
you
the
buy the
300 a
condo,
month.
like Jennifer said, you're buying
Okay.
the building, you're not
Maybe
buying.
I
You
just
don't
need to
own
go
the
to the
land. When you
river.
buy a condo, you don't own the land. Yes.
No, I know, that's what I'm saying, though,
There
it's
are a
like
number of ways that we
cabins.
go.
Paying the rent from.
Well, what was it, 231?
300.
Not the HOA, what was the property taxes?
$231.
That's what.
So you're
is
paying
that mon-
taxes
that's
on a
monthly?
property,
Is that monthly?
Probably the assessed value.
a year. Oh, that's a month.
That's a month. So that's where that's coming in because a manufactured home is like 600, but their rent on the property is 300. A year's worth of taxes was like 660, because there's one I've been following, not because I want it,
Okay.
but their rent a month for their space is $300. So the city should be getting $231 per unit a month.
Well, so if this is a successful project, it's built, I guess you pass it off, it's approved and all
Yeah,
that.
they did the stuff they were supposed to.
Yeah.
I know that much.
Okay, well, I'd just like to see where the city, it's not clear of.
Where does Mr. Public Interest fall in line?
Yes,
What do you
yes.
want to know?
Well, that's the public end of it, I don't think.
The first
What
name
do you want to
interest
know?
is the last.
Right.
How much revenue are you getting? That's the question.
Revenue and down the road for these 150 years, is the city just gonna lease this out the whole time? It means a lot for someone purchasing this. It's a big deal. You don't own the property, you're not, you're a member of the HOA.
That HOA though is extremely high. What do you get for that?
Well, you're paying the taxes on the common areas and maintenance on the outside.
And I'm gonna pay, what, 3,600 for that a year?
The HOA has to do roofs and siding.
These are containers, they're metal containers stacked on top of each other.
Well, they're modified. They look cute.
They're really cool.
No, that's not what I mean.
It's easier to.
Jennifer's trying to sell one right now.
I am not.
It's easier to build a stick-built home than containers.
It's nice to.
All right, so Russ, what do you want to know?
I thought I said that. What did I
Okay,
say?
what is it?
What's the city getting out of it? That's what you wanna know.
All right, so I second.
Okay. Agree with what we get out of it as a city?
Yeah,
I second.
yeah.
I'll say aye.
Aye.
Any nays?
There was a motion and
There's
a.
an aye.
There's a motion in there somewhere.
Yeah.
And then should we ask that,
Creative.
should Jacob write to Matt Brown and, or should we just do an informal thing? You wanna,
It's probably John Walsh. He's
John?
very intimate with that agreement.
all right, so we wanna know what's the city getting out of it,
Very intimate.
please?
Cherry on top?
Yeah, okay.
You can report on it, FYI.
Yeah.
Is that appropriate?
Uh,
Next
Yeah.
week, yeah,
That's fine.
midnight.
You don't need to show up. He's probably on his yacht.
Let's hold the next planning commission meeting on the clock. I move that we have the next planning commission on fins. Just kidding.
So,
Just kidding.
I'd only have one thing. I would like to welcome and thank Russ Lowe for joining us. You're still awake.
He's still here, yeah, I can see
I
him.
did.
I'll show everybody.
I managed to stay awake for the whole meeting.
What time is it where you are now, Russ?
It is about 10 till 7 a.m.
Oh my
It's
God.
7.
Wow.
So I gotta get in the shower and go to work now.
Jeez.
You just made
Thanks, Russ. We
$30
appreciate
much.
your
Only till
your
September.
sacrifice.
Till September.
Yeah.
All right, meeting adjourned.
Have a good day.
Have a good
Thanks.
day.
10:52.